It all starts with this popular automn game called Noblesse Fantasia, but the thing is, it's only an automn game by name. It's actually a total magic action fantasy world where the main goal is to take down the strongest villainess Tilty. She's the big boss everyone has to face. He says he ended up dedicating his entire life to her, living as a sword saint to follow his destiny, and now everything has changed, starting in this quiet little village by the mountain. Sold ends up on the ground after a rough exchange, and his dad tells him the match is pretty much over, but the kid isn't having it. Even though his dad calls his name to stop, Sold gets back up and says he isn't finished yet. He charges right back in, yelling for his dad to get ready, while the older man tries to get him to slow down. A villager walking by watches the two of them, joking about how the Master Ranger is always so hyped up, and an old lady nearby notices too, thinking about what a hardworking little Lord Sold is for training every single day. The dad is actually the one starting to sweat, eventually asking Sold if they can just take a quick breather, but Sold just looks at him with total focus. He tells his dad he needs to train him way harder than this because he can't use magic at all, so he has to make up for it with his sword. Everything is happening in this small, quiet village way out in the middle of nowhere, and it turns out this whole place is tucked away inside the kingdom of Albert. This is the world of the game Noblesse Fantasia, and it turns out the kid was born into the Ranger family. They're just minor nobles living way out in the country. Sold realizes he's actually been reincarnated into this world as Sword, so when he was just a baby, his new parents named him Sold Ranger. He remembers waking up for the first time and seeing these two strangers staring back at him, but as they raised him, he started piecing everything together by listening to the names and jobs people talked about. Eventually, he figured out he was living in some random corner of the game world, specifically as the son of a baron who has absolutely no impact on the actual story. He figured there had to be a real reason he got sent into a game world like this. And even though he had such high hopes for his new life, his dad just calls him over to get back to reality. Sold's dad calls him over to tell him something serious, and it turns out to be the worst news possible for a gamer. His dad explains that the Ranger family has been unable to use magic for generations, leaving Sold's dreams crushed. The game world is built on magic and saving the world from beasts, so realizing he can't use any of it hits him hard. He just stares off into nothing because in a world like this, someone who can't use magic feels like a worthless character with no real purpose. But even so, he refuses to give up on being special. He kept believing in destiny and runs out of the house yelling for his dad to look at what he found in the attic. Sold holds up an old scroll with a picture of a warrior, looking like he finally found his big break. He's convinced he found a secret technique called demon god-style swordsmanship, but his dad just stands there looking completely stressed out. The scroll describes a crazy power that lets a person harbor demonic energy inside them, turning their very soul into a weapon. It claims that from this specific stance, the user can unleash a deadly killing move known as Kama-Isin. Sold is totally hyped because he thinks he found a secret game mechanic hidden in the real world, and he's convinced this technique is the answer for someone like him who can't use any magic at all. Holding up his sword, he yells that this is his destiny and he's going to master the demon god style. But his dad immediately shuts him down and tells him he's got it all wrong, which really throws Sold off. The dad admits the scroll is a family heirloom passed down for generations, but then he drops the truth. The whole secret technique is just a total fake. Turns out, every man in their family for the last 3 generations tried to study that scroll during training, and not a single one of them could ever get the move to actually work. Dad says the ancestors probably just made it up to give the kids who lacked magic some false hope, leaving Sold standing there realizing the legendary scroll was basically just a fairy tale written on paper. Sold looks down at the scroll, completely crushed as he tries to process that it might be a fake, but his dad tells him it's fine if he can't use magic or that specific style. He explains that their family has protected this peaceful land for generations, and that kind of life is actually pretty great, leaving the two of them standing there in silence, just looking out at the massive world, until Sold snaps out of it and yells that his dad has to be lying about the scroll being a dud. He's not buying it for a second and shouts that he's going to prove it's real no matter what happens. So from that day on, he starts training under his dad's guidance every single day. 3 whole years go by and Sold has grown up quite a bit, but he still hasn't been able to make the demon god style work. Dad looks at him and says the move is really just a drawing in a book, then asks if he's finally ready to quit, but Sold just keeps on swinging, refusing to give up on his dream. Sold looks his dad right in the eye and shouts that he's never giving up, making it clear he's staying on this path, and his dad just sighs, telling him it's fine and he can keep at it until he's finally satisfied. But for now, Dad says they have to head home or Mom is going to be mad, and Sold quickly agrees to call it a day. Looking at his parents and the maid back at the house, Sold realizes he's ended up with a really kind family, and life is honestly great, filled with big family dinners and afternoon horse rides through the fields. He spends his time fishing with his dad while his mom watches from a picnic, and he admits he has zero complaints about this life. But as the sun goes down over the estate and the stars come out, things start to feel a bit different. Sold lies awake in his room, staring at the ceiling and thinking that he really wants to believe in something more. Specifically, that there has to be a real reason he was reincarnated as a nobody noble in this world. Outside, the sky turns gray and a heavy rain starts pouring down over the quiet house. Sold asks his mom where his dad is, and she tells him he left early for a meeting with other nobles. She seems a little confused by the whole thing, wondering why even country nobles like them were invited, but Sold just stares out the window at the rain, lost in his own head for a second. He tells her he's going to head out and train alone today, and she warns him not to overdo it since the weather is bad. As he walks, he thinks about how he's been practicing with his sword every day and is already 10 years old now. He wonders if the day will ever come when he can actually use the demon god style, but he quickly shakes his head, telling himself that being negative isn't going to help anything. He decides to stay positive and keep believing that the Majin style is his true destiny. Suddenly, something catches his eye and makes him stop in his tracks. He takes off running toward the trees, sure that he heard a strange sound coming from deep inside the woods. The rain is coming down hard in the middle of the woods as Sold pushes through the trees, stopping for a second to catch his breath because he spots a young girl collapsed face down in the mud, and he can't believe what he's seeing. He rushes over and kneels down, asking if she's okay and why she's out here in a storm like this, but then he notices her bare feet and starts to wonder if she's some kind of runaway. The girl lets out a weak groan, and Sold tries to get her to stay with him while looking at her tear-streaked face, trying to figure out where she could have possibly come from. Just then something catches his eye and makes him freeze up. A strange energy starts swirling through the air, and suddenly Sold realizes the rain is literally freezing right in front of him, and he has no idea what's going on. Sold is completely frozen. His eyes go wide as he tries to find the words, but he just stammers that there's no way this is real, telling himself this whole thing can't be happening while he stares at the monster's fangs, wondering why it had to show up here of all places, and he stands his ground between the girl and the massive shadow. Looking closer, he realizes this thing is actually a high-level boss from the end of the game he cleared, and he starts spiraling thinking he was reborn for a reason, but now wondering if this mess is all he gets for believing in his new life. As the wolf stands over them, he wonders if his fate is to just die here without any of it meaning a thing. He thinks it's impossible and just way too cruel for things to end like this, so he lunges forward, grabbing the girl and diving out of the way as a massive explosion of ice slams into the ground where they were just standing. The two of them hit the ground hard after the blast, and Tilty lets out a groan while Soul just tries to process what just happened, but Tilty looks him in the eyes and says she's sorry, explaining that those slave traders actually let that monster loose just to track her down and catch her again. She starts panicking and tells Sold he needs to get out of there right now, begging him to run so he doesn't end up suffering because of her. Sold is totally stunned as she breaks down, crying and looking totally broken over the mess. Looking at her face, Sold realizes her eyes look just like the ones belonging to the biggest threat from that game he loved, the legendary villainous Tilty Magister. She was the girl everyone in the game hated because she spent all her time tormenting the main character and doing terrible things. But the worst part is that in every single version of the story, she's destined to lose everything and end up in total ruin. After beating the game, the truth about Tilty's past finally starts to make sense, and it turns out every single person she ever cared about had already died, leaving her all alone. She was born as the child of a mistress and was hated by everyone for it, so she lived in total poverty until her mother was murdered, and then she was taken and forced into a life of slavery. A noble family from the country eventually showed up and rescued her, but the tragedy didn't stop there because they were all brutally slaughtered too. Tilty grew to resent the entire world for bringing nothing but misery to the people around her. Pretty soon she just started hating herself, and she became the saddest girl in the world, eventually turning into the villain everyone feared. Sold looks at the crying girl and realizes she has the exact same eyes as the villainess from the game. He wonders if leaving her alone is what turns her into that monster. And the thought hits him like a ton of bricks, so he draws his sword, standing right in front of the chained girl to keep her safe. A giant wolf shows up and says he finally sees what's happening, while Sold demands to know what the creature even is looking at the beast. Sold says that this moment is exactly what he was born for. The girl looks up through her tears and tells him that her name is Tilty. Sold finally understands why he was brought into this world as a noble with the freedom to do whatever he wants. He tells Tilty that he's going to be the one to change her destiny. He lets out a loud yell as he prepares to fight, and Tilty just watches in total shock because his sword is actually starting to glow. Sold lets loose a massive burst of energy that slams right into the giant wolf. Tilty just watches from the ground as the light fades and Sold realizes something. He didn't know it then, but he'd actually triggered a hidden part of the game that most players never see. He explains that the secret to unlocking this power is pretty specific. You have to fight with a sword on purpose, hold your ground without moving, and take the enemy's hit head-on, but the most important part is having a real, desperate need to protect someone. Tilty looks on in total awe as Sold starts filling his entire body with this crazy demonic power. It's the start of the demon god style, a technique that turns his whole being into nothing but a living blade. He stays low to the ground, moving so fast he's basically a blur, and he swings his sword upward with everything he's got, calling out a special ice wolf strike that smashes right into the wolf's face, sending shards of energy flying everywhere as the hit connects clean. Sold finishes his massive strike and stays low while the power flows around him. The giant wolf gets completely wrecked by the force of the attack, and Sold realizes the secret demon god style he used is actually the real deal. He starts laughing to himself because he can't believe the legends were actually true, so he sheathes his sword and starts walking away. He thinks about how all that crazy training he did wasn't for nothing after all, and then he goes over to Tilty. He looks her right in the eyes and tells her he's the Sword Ranger, and that she's basically his destiny, so he remembers why he was reincarnated here in the first place. He gives her a huge smile and promises her that everything is going to be okay now, making Tilty start crying happy tears. She tells him she's just glad to be by his side so they can change the world together, and she jumps up to give him a big hug. Sold looks at her and mentions the dark fate waiting for her as the villainess, but says he will just cut down anyone or anything that tries to get in their way. Meanwhile, far away on a dark cliff, there's a massive castle getting hit by a lightning storm inside. Some guy sitting on a throne asks if their wolf Fenrir is back yet. His followers have to tell him the bad news. They haven't heard anything from the wolf or the slave trader. Back at the dark castle, the masked leader isn't happy and tells his followers to find that guy right now because he's obsessed with finding Tilty. He stares at a giant skull while wondering where she could have gone, and sitting on his throne made of bones, he calls Tilty his beloved sister. He makes a promise to himself that he'll definitely bring her back home. Meanwhile, a carriage pulls up to the ranger mansion at night. A man inside sighs about what a long day of work he just had, so Garland steps through the front door and yells out that he's finally home. The family's wet nurse, Baba, is there to meet him, but Sold runs up to welcome his dad back. Right next to him, the family introduces Tilty and lets Garland know who she is, and then they drop the big news. They tell him they want to officially welcome Tilty as a new member of the Ranger family, which completely catches Garland off guard. He looks at Sold with a face full of shock and asks him what the heck is actually going on. Things are finally settling down at the mansion for Muro, the wet nurse Baba, and Tilty, who is now safe from her dark past. Now the whole Ranger crew is together, with Garland heading the house while Sold keeps his secret about being a reincarnator to himself. The whole family is gathered around the dining table as Garland tries to wrap his head around the story, and Sold explains how he saved Tilty from a monster and brought her back. He looks his dad right in the eye to make sure he's listening, but Garland just crosses his arms and takes it all in. Muro looks over at him, asking if he doesn't think the poor girl's situation is just tragic, so the room gets a bit quiet as they realize Tilty literally has no family left to go back to. Sold doesn't waste any time and begs his dad to let her stay. Garland sits there for a second, just thinking things over while he suddenly flips the mood and gives a big thumbs up. He tells them there's no problem at all and winks while saying that doing good deeds is just part of the job for a noble family. He stands up and officially announces that her name is now Tilty Ranger. Everyone is cheering and happy for her, so Sold smiles to himself, thinking about how they finally took a real step forward in changing the future. But he knows the stakes, since Tilty is the villain from the game Noblesse Fantasia who's supposed to end up completely ruined. Everything in this world comes straight from a game Sold played in his past life, and he's convinced he was reincarnated here for the sole purpose of saving Tilty. He knows he has to stay by her side to keep her safe, so when Garland tells him to teach her about their home, Sold doesn't hesitate to agree, feeling like his plan to bring her into the family worked out exactly how he hoped it would. Since she's 9 and a year younger than him, Sold gives her a big smile and says he's her big brother now, which makes Tilty's face turn bright red as she tries to find the words to respond. But the pressure is too much and she suddenly bolts out of the room, leaving Sold standing there completely shocked as he calls out her name. Later on, Garland is worried because she looks so scared, and while Sold asks his mom if she's being gentle with her, Muro promises she is, even though Tilty is still staying behind closed doors and won't talk to any of them. Muro says Tilty is probably just trying to work through her feelings, so they shouldn't force it and instead just be patient, since Garland is sure she'll eventually open up to them, even if she's struggling right now. The family stands there looking pretty serious about it all, and Sold agrees with his mom, thinking about how tough it must be for Tilty to suddenly be told she has a new family. As the night goes on, Sold brings up the slave market cleanup operation his dad mentioned before. Garland explains that a bunch of nobles actually got together specifically to handle that mission, and while they managed to free the slaves and get them somewhere safe, they couldn't quite take out the whole organization. Sold stops in his tracks and asks if Tilty was one of the people caught up in that, which makes him realize she really was just a prisoner before they found her. It all starts clicking for him. The wolf from earlier was definitely sent by those traders to drag her back to that slave organization. Sold realizes just how crazy it is that those people actually used the legendary beast Fenrir for this, and it makes him wonder why they'd go through all that trouble just to target Tilty. He thinks about the organization hiding behind the slave traders, seeing Tilty looking small and scared, and starts to suspect these guys are the ones behind Tilty's doom flag. Back in the present, Garland stands in the field and tells Sold it's time to show what he can do, specifically that Magin style he says he's mastered, and Sold is more than ready to prove it. Under the light of a crescent moon, Sold takes his stance while his dad watches closely. He holds his sword high and focuses every bit of his energy thinking back to the moment he faced Fenrir and felt the power of the ley lines for the first time, feeling that same insane energy surging through his body and his blade right now. Sold looks his dad right in the eyes and yells that the legends were actually real, referring to the secret technique that only the heir to the Ranger family is supposed to know. He calls out the name of the demon god style, and Garland is so shocked he can't even find the words to reply. Sold tries to show off the ice wolf flash, but his wooden sword just snaps right in his hands. Sold starts freaking out that the sword broke, but his dad just stands there looking at him like he's lost his mind. Garland tells him he'll just buy him a new one, but Sold keeps insisting that he's telling the truth about the power. Truth is, he hasn't actually been able to pull off that style even once since that day. He grips the broken handle and realizes this hidden game move must have some kind of special trigger to work. The plan is to find that trigger fast so he can master the style and keep Tilty safe from any more attacks, especially since Tilty's been living a peaceful life ever since the Rangers officially took her in. The whole family gathers around the table for a big pizza dinner. Everyone's having a blast and Tilty even gets a brand new dress that Murrow made for her, while the family wet nurse cheers her on. Garland and Sold come back from a trip showing off a massive fish and a crab they caught, but when they all start piling on the compliments and excitement at the same time, Tilty just stands there, completely overwhelmed by all the sudden attention. She ends up bolting out of the room, leaving the rest of the family standing there totally confused. Garland complains that she still won't open up to him, but Murrow reminds him that these things take time and they can't just rush it. Sold watches them, thinking that living together like this should be enough to keep everyone safe, though he can't help but wonder if avoiding a dark future for Tilty is actually going to be this easy. That night, a massive thunderstorm rolls in over the house, lightning flashes across the sky while Sold lies awake in bed. He stares at the ceiling, feeling like there's one really important detail about Tilty's story that he's totally forgetting. The sound of glass shattering rings out through the house, and Sold's eyes snap wide open as he jumps out of bed. He grabs his sword and starts running, wondering what that loud noise could have been. He quickly realizes it's coming from Tilty's room. He doesn't waste a second and throws the door open, ready for whatever is on the other side. The room is pitch black, but the sight in front of him is worse than he imagined. He screams Tilty's name as he sees the window is smashed and 3 creepy bat monsters are circling her bed. Tilty is curled up in a ball, trapped inside a swirling mass of dark energy. Sold stares at her, trying to figure out what that stuff is before realizing it's pure darkness. The one-eyed monsters hiss and make weird noises while they hover right over her. Sold is completely caught off guard, wondering why a magical beast would show up here of all places, but he doesn't let the shock slow him down. He yells for Tilty again and pulls his sword, ready to take them on. Sold lunges forward, trying to use the only weapon he has, but he quickly realizes the sword is still broken, which is definitely not ideal for a fight like this. The monsters aren't slowing down at all. One of them lets out a sharp screech as they circle the room. Sold tries to swat them away with his broken hilt, cursing under his breath while looking over at Tilty. He tells Tilty to hold on just a bit longer while he goes to find his dad for help, but she suddenly yells for him to just leave her alone, which completely catches him off guard. Tilty starts crying, saying she's sorry and that things like this always happen to her, and she continues by saying she doesn't even understand why all these bad things follow her around. Sold looks at her, feeling her pain and just whispering her name as he makes a decision. He yells back that there's no way he's leaving her behind because they're family now. Sold stands there totally stunned, realizing his promise to stay together was a huge mistake. As Tilty hugs him tight while crying, she tells him he's the one who saved her and talks about how his whole family welcomed her with open arms. But even with all that kindness, she was only happy for a second. Tilty admits that happiness is exactly why she hesitated. The shadows start taking over as she screams that it's no use and that she shouldn't even be there. She yells that staying will only drag everyone down, and Sold just stands there as it finally clicks. Tilty cries that she'll bring them all to misery, and right then, Sold remembers everything from the game. This is the hidden backstory of the villainess from Noblesse Fantasia, the part players see after the credits, showing one specific episode from her life, a memory from the story he played before. It's the story of the noble family that took Tilty in, and how they all ended up dying because of her. The memory flashes through Sold's mind, his entire family being brutally slaughtered in the game's original timeline. And as he watches Tilty break down in front of him, he realizes that the tragedy he remembers was actually about the Ranger family all along. He stands there watching the dark energy swarm her as Tilty screams through her tears, begging him to just kick her out and leave her alone before it's too late. Sold just stares at her with this look of total focus, his eyes showing he's already made a choice. He knows that if he just walks away and stops getting involved with Tilty right now, then his family might actually survive and avoid being murdered. Saving everyone from that horrible ending would mean one less tragedy in this world. But Sold doesn't care about the risk and pulls her into a tight hug, cutting through all the dark shadows. Tilty looks up at him in total shock, barely able to find the words to ask why he's still holding on. The shadow monsters start swarming the room with a loud, creepy creak, but Sold doesn't flinch, keeping his eyes locked on Tilty even as they close in. Tilty struggles in his arms, telling him to stop and yelling for him to let her go, but Sold just holds on tighter, telling her he won't and that he's never letting go. He asks if it even matters if she makes him unhappy, then tells her she's not alone, reminding her that they both have parents now and that he's right there for her. Sold smiles and says she's already his precious sister, promising to protect her with his life. The words finally hit her and Tilty just loses it, sobbing uncontrollably against his chest, as she barely manages to choke out a thank you through all the heavy crying. She finally calls him her big brother, and the dark energy starts to clear out of the room. Sold looks down at Tilty and calls out her name, noticing that the creepy dark energy has finally disappeared from the room. Someone's eyes go wide as they take in the scene, completely shocked by how everything just changed so fast. Tilty finally stops fighting it and just lets the tears flow, looking way more peaceful than she did a second ago. Sold watches her with a soft smile, relieved that he was actually able to reach her and stop the darkness. He thinks to himself that even if he doesn't fully get what that dark power was, he knows one thing for sure: if it's going to bring Tilty nothing but trouble, he's not having it. Right then, his parents burst into the room. His dad yells out asking what's wrong with Tilty, while his mom looks at Sold and asks what the heck just happened. But Sold just looks them both right in the eye and tells them he needs a new sword. He's got this serious look on his face as he explains that he has to become much stronger than he is now. He tells them he's going to protect Tilty no matter what, and that he's going to be the one to cut down any darkness that tries to mess with her life. His mom is just standing there totally surprised, but his dad can't help but smirk, looking pretty impressed by the kid's resolve. Sold's dad agrees to get him an awesome custom sword, and Sold's pretty hyped as he thanks him. They look out over the town of Swordguest, where his dad says he's going to introduce him to the best smith around. But over at the shop, a couple of guys in suits go running out, yelling about how they're never coming back. The smith doesn't even care, just standing there with a hammer and telling them good riddance since they only care about fashion. She pulls up her goggles and vents about how much she hates nobles, but Sold's just watching her, confident he can win her over. Determined to get that new blade, Sold sets off with Tilty and his dad heading straight for the town of Gust. The city is massive, stretching out as far as they can see from the road. The streets are packed with people and carriages moving everywhere. Sold mentions how lively the place is, and his dad explains it's a major trade hub for both land and sea. But he warns him that while two noble families run the town, all these crowds also bring in some pretty shady characters. Sold's dad looks down and tells Tilty to make sure she doesn't get separated in the crowd, and she gives a nervous nod, promising that she won't. Sold reaches out and takes her hand, suggesting they just hold on to each other so they don't get lost in the middle of all these people. Tilty looks up at him with a huge smile, blushing a bit as she thanks her big brother Sold for looking out for her. Sold just smiles back, thinking to himself about how much she's finally warmed up to him lately. As they walk through the busy market, he remembers how she actually asked to come along on the trip, which was a massive help because he really just wants to be by her side all the time to make sure she stays safe, no matter where they go. But as they're walking, both of them stop dead in their tracks, shocked by what's on the street. A street vendor is just using fire magic from his finger to grill meat like it's nothing. Kids are even playing tag while shooting fire and water at each other. And high above them, a girl is just flying a broom through the sky to deliver some bags. The town is literally filled with magic, from vendors grilling snacks with their fingers to kids just blasting it around for fun, making it pretty clear that in the world of noblesse fantasia, having magic is just a normal, everyday thing for most people. But Sold stands there clenching his fist tight, and both his dad and Tilty can tell he's feeling a bit left out. So his dad tells him not to worry about it because not everyone is built for magic. And Sold just nods, thanking him while gripping his hilt, saying he doesn't need magic as long as he has his sword. After all, the demon god sword style he's learning comes with its own unique and crazy power, even if he has to admit to himself that he's still got a long way to go before he actually masters it. But his dad loves the confidence and tells them both to keep moving so they can finally pick up their new gear. They make it to a large, old-school workshop with a giant sword sign hanging right over the front door, and his dad yells out a hello while Sold looks around, wondering if the place is even open since nobody is answering. A voice from inside the shop yells that they're being way too loud and asks who's out there, so Sold's dad introduces himself formally as Baron Galland Ranger. The person inside snaps back that nobles can just get lost, which totally catches Sold and his dad off guard. The dad quickly tries to explain that the master blacksmith actually forged a sword for him a long time ago, hoping that the door finally opens, revealing a tough woman with a massive hammer. She bluntly tells them the old man passed away and that since she's the one in charge now, they should just beat it. The dad starts to ask if she's the master's kid, but she just says her name is Frey and tells them see ya as she turns around, but Sold speaks up, telling her that he was actually looking for a sword of his own. Frey looks back with a mean glare, calling him a cheeky noble brat and telling him to just go ask his dad to buy him a toy sword instead. Sold stands there looking completely stung by the insult, and before he can even say anything, the door slams shut, leaving the whole group standing in the dust. Sold realizes that triggering an event to get a high-tier weapon isn't going to be easy. Meanwhile, his dad is stressed out, apologizing because he didn't know the blacksmith's daughter had taken over the shop. He figures they should just go find another place, even if he's not sure any other smiths in town are actually skilled enough. But Sold isn't ready to give up yet and tells his dad he wants to try asking one more time, even though his dad tells him it's a bad idea. The kid just smiles and says it's okay because he really just wants to talk to her the right way. His dad agrees to go scout for other shops and asks Tilty what she's doing, so she decides to stay right there with her big brother. The two of them stand together in front of the shut door. Tilty looks pretty nervous and asks why that woman was acting so scary back there. Sold doesn't seem bothered at all and just asks if she managed to see what was in the back of the shop, because hidden inside were a bunch of rugged, heavy-duty swords that proved she's actually the real thing. The swords on the wall look pretty rough and bulky at first glance, almost like they weren't finished right, but Sold can feel something special about them. There's a quality to the blades that just pulls him in. He walks right back into the forge where Frey is working and tells her he really wants to have a proper talk. Tilty is shaking behind him while Frey turns around, totally annoyed, asking why they think they can just barge in, but Sold just tells her he has a request. He holds out his own sword to show her how messed up the hilt is, and Frey lifts her goggles to get a better look. Sold tells her straight up that he needs a powerful sword, something that won't break even when he's going all out. Frey just stares at him, looking completely caught off guard, and asks who the hell he even is. He tells her his name is Sold and that he needs this weapon so he can keep his sister safe. But before they can finish, some voices come from the door asking if this is the place that kicked them out before. A huge guy in armor named Mobrib stomps in, yelling that he's there on orders from Lord Walger Debyhip and demands they make a sword right now. Sold yells out in surprise as the mood shifts. Frey just sighs, rubbing her head and saying it's just one thing after another on this cursed day. Mobrib stands his ground at the door, but Frey doesn't back down. She tells him her dad always refused to make swords that were just for showy nobles. The big guy gets aggressive, leaning in and shouting that her old man definitely forged a blade for Lord Walger back in the day. Frey goes quiet, looking down as her face shadows over. She quietly admits that he's right, and her father really did forge it, but there was a dark reason behind it. She explains how Walger threatened her father, claiming he'd do anything to save his daughter, which takes her back to when she was just a kid. She remembers her dad teaching her the craft every single day, while he'd yell about how a sword isn't just some pretty ornament to look at. He always insisted that a blade is only meant for fighting, and he'd point at those fancy, useless weapons and warn her never to dare making anything that was just for show. He told her to only forge the kind of swords she truly believed in, and practically begged her not to end up making the same mistakes he did. Frey watches the memory of him working the anvil, remembering him saying a sword is power, a belief he held onto until the very end. Frey thinks back on her dad, calling him a foolish old man for throwing everything away just to protect her, and she realizes that's exactly why she has to make a real choice now. Frey shouts that she's taken her father's spirit to heart, looking completely ready to stand her ground. She grips her hammer and vows she'll never forge anything but the real fighting blades she believes in. Tilty and Sold just watch her in total awe, seeing her find her spark again, but Mobrib just smirks at her, acting like she's talking about ancient history since he thinks swords are basically useless now. He goes on about how magic is the only thing that matters, claiming a single mage could easily wreck 100 guys with swords, so to him, a blade is just a fake magic staff or some shiny jewelry for a noble to show off. Mobrib loses his patience and grabs Frey by the collar, lifting her up while yelling that nobody wants a real weapon anymore. He leans in close, telling her Walger expects big things from her dad's old skills, so she better just shut up and get to work. Mobrib looms over Frey, asking if she really wants to be threatened too, which just makes her groan in frustration while she's trapped. Sold suddenly steps up and yells for the guy to stop, and he makes it clear that if anyone here actually needs a real sword to fight with, it's him. Frey just stares at him, completely shocked that this kid is stepping in for her. But Mobrib isn't impressed at all, looking down at Sold and wondering why some random brat is talking back. Without a second thought, the knight swings and sends Sold flying across the room. Tilty screams out for her brother as Mobrib tells him to watch his mouth or he'll straight up kill him. Sold hits the floor hard, clutching his chest and feeling like a total idiot for letting his guard down like that. He looks up with his eyes wide in surprise because Tilty is standing right in the knight's face, yelling at him to stop being mean to her big brother. Tilty is losing it, crying and yelling that she'll never forgive anyone who hurts her big brother. She looks completely terrified as Mobrib grabs her, asking if she wants to die along with him. Frey is right there, calling the knight a total bastard while she grips her smithing hammer. Just then, Sold manages to get back up and grabs one of the heavy blades from the shop floor. Frey yells at him to put her sword down, but he ignores her and gets into a perfect combat stance, lifting the massive weapon like it's light as a feather. His eyes are sharp and cold as he tells the knight to get his hands off his sister immediately, while Frey just stands there confused, wondering how a brat like him is even moving a blade that heavy. Tilty keeps crying out for her brother, but Mobrib just calls Sold a little shit and stares him down through his helmet, asking the kid if he actually understands the mess he's making. Without waiting for an answer, the knight charges right at him, yelling that he doesn't care if he dies. Mobrib laughs and says he can't complain before shooting a massive fireball. He's still holding Tilty, who just loses it and screams while the heat from the blast gets closer. Sold stays completely calm through the chaos because he starts feeling something. He's right there. And at that exact moment, a strange sensation takes root inside him as he swings. It's the power from Fenrir, the demonic beast he fought, and now he feels it filling up his entire body with energy. He looks ready to end this as he swings the massive blade, sending a heavy wave of force straight forward. The pressure from the attack rips through the air, clearing everything out. Then Sold calls out his move, the wolf flash, and cuts right through the knight's defense. Mobrib freaks out and screams about his arm, wondering what the hell is up with that sword. Mobrib is totally reeling from the hit, while Frey keeps Tilty safe. Sold stands his ground, thinking about how a sword is basically pure power, and he shouts that it's actually the power he needs to protect the people he cares about. Frey is completely stunned by what the kid just did. Meanwhile, Tilty is just beaming because she knows it's over for the bad guys. Mobrib is groaning in pain, and his buddy with the glasses starts freaking out, calling his name as the two of them decide to hightail it out of there. Mobrib curses while he runs, and his assistant begs him to wait up, leaving Sold and Tilty alone. Tilty jumps into a hug and thanks her big brother for everything. He just checks to make sure she's doing okay, and she's so hyped, saying that move was exactly like the one he used before. Sold just smiles and agrees, finally putting the pieces together because he remembers fighting that massive wolf Fenrir. It's just like that time, and it happened again when Mobrib grabbed her. It all clicks for him now, and he realizes that wanting to save Tilty is the secret to using the Magin style. He's just glad she's safe. The cheap blade finally gives out, snapping right off the handle, and Tilty starts panicking, yelling about how the sword just broke into pieces. Sold looks at the useless hilt and says this one failed too, realizing that a normal sword just isn't built to handle the Magin style. The kids both jump when they realize Frey is standing right there, watching them with her arms crossed while she just stares them down with a super intense look. Sold and Tilty immediately start bowing and apologizing, saying they're so sorry for wrecking one of her swords, but Frey tells them not to worry about it. She says she'll actually forge a new one for him, which totally catches Sold off guard. She just gives him a little smile, thinking back to the time her dad was working at the anvil and told her that a sword represents power. He told her it's the power a person needs to fight and stay true to whatever they believe in. Frey watches Sold and realizes his conviction is the real deal. He wants power just to protect what matters. So she decides to forge a blade worthy of that and tells him straight up that she's going to make a mighty sword that won't break, no matter how hard he uses it. She gives them a confident wink and a thumbs up promising that she'll personally be the one to get the job done. Sold can't help but smile, thinking about finally having a weapon that can handle his demon god style as he happily thanks her. Both kids start shouting their thanks at her, making Frey act tough and tell them to drop the formalities and just call her Frey. The thought of the new weapon has Sold pumped, knowing this is exactly what he needs to reach a whole new level of strength. Moving on to the huge mansion on the other side of town, things aren't going nearly as well for Mobrib, who's standing there with his arm in a sling while Lord Walger screams that any soldier who loses to a kid is fired on the spot. The knight starts panicking and begs his master to listen, insisting that the kid he fought was way more than just some regular brat. He explains that the boy uses swordplay that looks like straight-up magic, and mentions the silver-haired girl was there too, leaving Walger completely shocked. Back at the mansion, Lord Walger repeats the news about a silver-haired girl being spotted, and his mohawked henchman laughs about how things are finally getting interesting. A loud shout of pure shock rings out from the blacksmith shop and carries all the way into the street, because Sold can't believe his ears and yells about Frey not being able to make the sword, while Tilty just looks confused and asks her for a reason. Frey stays calm and just repeats herself, telling the kids she definitely can't forge the weapon for them at this exact moment. She asks Sold if it's true that he can't use any magic, and he says yeah, which is the whole reason he works so hard on his swordsmanship. Frey points a finger right in his face and tells him that his specific style of swordplay is actually the biggest problem they have. She explains that back when she watched him use that Ice Wolf flash move, she could feel something deep inside his technique, something that felt like a huge amount of demonic energy. And then she goes on to say that he's basically using the Majin style, which is a way of fighting that draws on the actual power of demons. She mentions an old scroll that describes the style as letting that dark power live inside your body, so you can turn your entire soul into a living blade. Frey explains how some fighters use their swords like magic staffs to fire off spells, and even though Sold used the power of ice, she points out that he was just coating the blade at first. But things changed when he actually turned the sword itself into pure magic to pull off his move, basically transforming the whole weapon into a blade of ice. She holds up a broken hilt and tells the kids that her regular swords just aren't up to the task, admitting she never built them to handle that much pressure or that kind of fighting style. Sold starts to panic and asks what they should do now, but Frey just stays cool and says the answer is simple. She tells them they just need to find materials strong enough to handle his power, which leaves both kids wondering what she means. Frey brings up a story her dad used to tell her about a special stone that actually comes from another world, a place known as the Magic Dimension, which is a dungeon world packed with magical beasts and overflowing with mana. Frey explains that the special ore found in that dimension is tough enough to handle any kind of demonic power, leaving Tilty sounding pretty shocked as she repeats the name of the stone to herself. Sold is totally hyped and wants to know what kind of rock we're talking about, but Frey just gives him a look and tells him to stay quiet. She finally reveals that the item they're looking for is called a mana stone, and as night falls over the busy city streets, the group decides to head back to where they're staying. They make it back to the inn to grab some food and talk things over. Sold's dad nods as he listens, finally understanding that they need a legendary sword to actually use the Majin style, asking Sold if having a weapon like that would really make his special fighting style a reality. Sold admits it's possible but mentions they still need a magic stone, which makes his dad start laughing about the timing of the conversation, only for the guy to suddenly freak out and spray his drink everywhere once the actual cost of a magic stone sinks in. Sold's dad is still recovering from the shock, wheezing as he asks if they're actually being serious about this. Sold looks over, checking to see if his old man is actually doing okay or if he's about to lose it, and the dad just stares back with a stressed look, telling the two of them that what they're asking for is way too much to handle. He starts explaining that magic stones are the kind of ultra-rare items that you can't even find for sale on the general market, basically making it clear that even a tiny fragment of one of those things is worth more than the most expensive jewels out there. Sold looks pretty down as he remembers Frey saying the exact same thing about how impossible they are to find. His dad keeps it real and says it's definitely not happening right now, but he promises he'll try to figure out some other way to get them what they need. Night falls over the city, and the focus shifts to the reality of the mana stones. Even back when this was all just a game, these things were famous for being incredibly hard to track down, and as Sold and Tilty settle into their beds for the night, Sold thinks about how much easier it was in the game where he just had to grind for cash. He just stares at the ceiling feeling the weight of it all, since trying to make this happen in real life is turning out to be a massive headache. Tilty rolls over and tells him she really hopes he can get those stones, so Sold just looks back with a smile and says he's hoping for the same thing. As they settle in, Tilty softly calls out to Sold. He looks over a bit confused and wonders what's up when she gives him a huge smile, thanking him for saving her and telling him he looked really cool back then. She giggles to herself and wishes him a good night, still calling him Big Brother, which leaves Sold lying there with a massive blush on his face, feeling pretty great about the whole situation. Looking out at the moon, he thinks to himself that since she's such a cute villainess, he's down to do whatever, deciding right then and there that he'll push through any kind of struggle to make her happy. So he commits to finding a way to get those magic stones delivered by the very next day. The next morning, Frey hands Sold a sword she fixed up for him, telling them she'll be waiting for their return. With the goodbyes finished, the group hops into their carriage and starts the long trek back to Soldier Village. But Sold's dad looks a bit bad about the trip, apologizing that they didn't actually get the new sword today. Sold's dad is still feeling down about the sword, but Sold tells him not to worry, he's just glad they finally have a clear plan for what to do next. So his dad turns to Tilty and asks if she at least got to relax a bit after all the chaos. She gives him a big smile and says she definitely did. Meanwhile, Sold thinks to himself that things are actually going perfectly. Even with the trouble, he feels like he's triggered all the right events to get that sword eventually. Everything is peaceful until a massive explosion suddenly rips right through the side of the carriage, sending the driver flying as Sold's dad yells out and Tilty screams in terror. Sold tries to grab onto her while the whole world turns into fire and smoke, but the carriage is completely wrecked. As it sits there smoldering on the side of the road, a pair of boots steps into view, revealing Dagora, who cheers about hitting his target. He calls for his guys to move in, and the rest of the bandits start hyped up, yelling his name. The bandits close in on the smoking ruins of the carriage with their swords drawn, and Dagora reaches into the mess, pulling Tilty out by the back of her collar. He laughs, telling his crew they finally got the treasure they were after. Looking at the unconscious girl, he says he's heading straight back to Lord Walger's place to deliver her. Dagora tells his crew he's heading out and leaving the rest of the cleanup to them, while the bandits shout back that they've got it covered. Sold and his dad are slumped over, totally out of it after the blast. As he walks through the quiet forest with Tilty over his shoulder, Dagora thinks about how he still can't believe a little kid could actually have such a crazy amount of strength, realizing it's the power of darkness. Later on, a voice speaks through a crystal ball, telling Walger and Dagora that stealing that specific power is the main goal for the Titan. Walger bows down low, nervously asking his master if they're really talking about the power of darkness, and the voice from the ball explains that it's a power that's both massive and scary. He says there is one person who can connect to a power that's strong enough to take over the entire world, and Tilty's brother stares coldly as he explains that this is what being the priestess of darkness is all about. The master reminds Walger that he's already failed to grab the girl twice now, leaving the noble groaning in shame. Walger looks like he's about to lose it, thinking about how the girl managed to run away after killing her mother the first time. Then Dagora remembers how she got away a second time, even when they turned Fenrir loose on her. The voice from the ball reminds Walger that this is now his third shot at this, while the two of them bow down, looking at the master's eye through the glass. He gives them a direct order to bring the targets back no matter what, and Walger starts freaking out, yelling that he'll get it done and to just leave everything to him. The master tells him that if he actually pulls it off, he'll give him some of that dark power for himself. Walger starts laughing, saying what a big honor it is and promising that they're definitely going to catch them this time. Meanwhile, Tilty wakes up and repeats the name Priestess of Darkness, sounding completely lost and confused as she asks where she is. Dagora, who's got her tucked under his arm, tells her to shut up if she doesn't want to die. She doesn't listen though and starts crying out to find out what happened to her father and her brother. Dagora just stands there with this nasty smirk on his face and lets out a quiet sound before coldly telling Tilty that he's the one who killed her family. The look on Tilty's face says it all. She's completely stunned by the news and starts screaming at the top of her lungs, but Dagora just carries her through the woods like luggage, telling her she's being too loud and needs to shut up. She can't even help it, just sobbing and letting out a loud cry because of the pain, so Dagora gets even more pissed off, snapping at her that he already told her to be quiet. But then he stops mid-sentence, looking totally confused by something he sees. Dark energy starts swirling up from the ground like water, and Dagora starts losing it, yelling to find out what the hell is going on as Tilty looks up with tears in her eyes, saying she's going to make everything miserable for everyone. Dagora is completely shocked, realizing that the power coming off her is way more than he expected. Tilty is completely surrounded by this crazy dark energy as she starts to change, and Dagora feels the darkness melting right into his own body, turning his eyes pitch black, while the power surges through his arms, making his veins pop out. He says it feels amazing and lets out a huge roar as his muscles double in size. So he yells that darkness is the absolute best, while Tilty gets swallowed up by a massive whirlpool of black energy. Watching from the side, Sold finally gets it. Her darkness is what boosts the power, which is why they want her, but Dagora just laughs like a maniac and asks what the hell the kid is even doing there. He demands to know what happened to all his men down the hill, but Sold just stays focused, even though he's huffing and puffing, thinking about how he was way too careless. He just didn't expect them to be this aggressive, especially with his dad already knocked out by the wagon. Sold's dad lies flat on his back by the wagon, thinking about how he really dropped the ball and wasn't ready for this. But even with his injuries, he stares up and decides he's done playing nice and won't be showing any more mercy to these guys. Meanwhile, Sold locks in, realizing that it doesn't matter when it happens or who he's up against, because if anyone even thinks about targeting Tilty, he's going to make them regret it. He's completely focused on the threat, and with a look of pure rage, he promises himself that he's going to cut every single one of them down. Dagora just laughs at the kid, standing in front of a massive swirl of dark energy, and says Moblib was right about him being special. But then he flexes his powered-up muscles and tells Sold not to underestimate him, calling him a little shit. He gets right in Sold's face with a nasty grin, yelling that the Priestess of Darkness belongs to the Titans now, and he keeps going, saying they're going to take real good care of her. It's clear he's got something sick planned, and as Tilty screams while being swallowed by the shadows, Dagora cackles about how she's basically just a human drug to boost their power. Sold doesn't say a word, just grips his sword and starts walking forward with a look that says he's done playing around. Dagora loses his cool and yells at the kid to just burn to ashes, throwing a massive punch backed by all that dark energy. But Sold is way too fast, moving in a blur and swinging his blade as he passes by like it's nothing. And before the big guy can even react, sharp slashes rip through the air and cut him down to size, leaving Dagora completely frozen in his tracks, stuck in the middle of his swing while the air around him turns cold. Sold just keeps walking away and starts sheathing his sword, while Dagora stands there totally confused, asking what just happened. But then he starts to freak out, letting out a pathetic yelp as he feels the ice starting to crawl up his body. He's crying and begging Sold to stop, but the frost is moving way too fast for him to do anything about it, and within seconds, he's almost buried under the ice, barely able to squeeze out a final whisper for help as his eye fills with fear. Sold finishes sheathing his blade and walks off behind him. The ice wolf flash leaves Dagora turned into a human popsicle. Sold looks on with a cold stare, reminding everyone that he has no mercy for anyone who goes after Tilty, while Dagora stands there like a statue, his face completely trapped in a block of ice. Walking away from the mess, Sold heads toward a massive ball of swirling dark energy and reaches out with both hands, giving a gentle smile while telling whoever is inside that everything is okay now. He calls out to Tilty, telling her to come to him as she peers out from the shadows with teary eyes, and she loses it, crying out for her big brother as she finally breaks through the darkness. She launches herself forward, tackling Sold into a massive hug while he catches her right there. Holding her close, Sold tells her that no matter how scared or hopeless she feels, he is definitely going to save her, making a promise that he won't ever let her down. Tilty just keeps crying into his chest while he tells her to stay strong and not let the darkness take over. Sold holds Tilty close and tells her he's sorry for everything, but she just hugs him back and thanks her big brother for saving her, right before her body goes totally limp in his arms. Sold realizes she's passed out from the stress, looking just like she did the last time this happened, and he stands there thinking about the Titans, knowing they're still out there hunting for that dark power. Just then some voices come from the woods talking about how he dropped Dagora in one hit, which surprises Sold, as a group of armored knights show up and announce they're from House Hartman. The lead knight says they're here to take Sold back, but he's not having it and asks what the hell is actually happening. The scene shifts to a massive mansion sitting under the moonlight, where it turns out House Hartman is one of the two big noble families running the town of Gust. The knights introduce the kid as Lord Sold, the son of the Ranger family, while everyone watches. The group arrives at the Hartman estate where a man at a desk welcomes Sold, telling him it's nice to finally meet him, and he introduces himself as Reich Hartman, the head of the whole family, while he stands there looking at the beds where Sold's dad and sister are resting, explaining that he already had a doctor come by to treat them. He tells Sold he can finally rest easy now that they're safe, but as the kid looks at Tilty, he realizes that relaxing is the last thing he can do right now, and the thought of it seems completely impossible. The reason he's so on edge is simple. As he looks at Reich, he realizes this guy is actually a character from the Noblesse Fantasia game, which means he's dealing with one of the main characters from the original story. And that's a huge problem, because within the world of the game, Reich is the exact person destined to stand against and take down the villainous Tilty. Sold sits on the couch looking totally stressed because he knows Reich and his family weren't supposed to be enemies until way later in the game, so their timing makes no sense, and even though he thanks Reich for saving them, he can't stop himself from worrying about what's really going on behind the scene. He starts thinking back to those 3 knights in the forest who claimed they were there just to collect him, and he wonders why they just happened to show up at the exact perfect moment to save the day, which feels a little too convenient, as he looks over at Reich sitting there with his soldiers standing guard. Realizing this is a major turning point in the story. Sold remembers from the game that Reich is a genius tactician who always thinks 3 steps ahead, and he knows for a fact that this guy isn't the type to go around helping people out of the goodness of his heart. It hits him that by saving Tilty's life, he's completely rewritten her fate and created a brand new timeline, one where Tilty's family survives instead of getting destroyed, which means Reich is meeting her as a kid instead of clashing with her at the academy years later. Looking at Reich's calm face, Sold can't help but wonder what this master tactician is actually planning to do next. Reich explains that his family has been keeping a close watch on Dagora, the same guy Sold just defeated, which comes as a surprise to the kid, but Reich clarifies that Dagora is actually the boss of the town's criminal underworld. The guy has been into all sorts of heavy stuff, like smuggling and human trafficking, and even though Reich has tried to bring him to justice several times in the past, it never sticks because his powerful backing makes all the charges disappear every single time. When Sold asks what he means by backing, Reich just gives him a serious look and confirms that the person behind it all is Walger Debihip, the head of the noble family that rules the town right alongside the Hartmans. Hearing that name makes Sold remember how Walger's thugs were aggressively demanding a custom sword, and how the noble even used threats against Frey to force her father's hand back in the day, leading Reich to conclude that the guy is just a massive villain who uses the townspeople to make himself rich. Reich looks down, admitting that even though things look bad, they don't have any real proof linking the noble to Dagora's gang, which makes one of his knights lose his cool, shouting that everyone in town already knows that guy is a total piece of shit. The other knight tells him to pipe down, while Reich adds that knowing the truth doesn't matter if nobody can actually do anything about it. Sold stares off to the side, finally starting to see how deep the corruption in this town really goes, and he looks Reich straight in the eye, asking if his real plan is to finally bring Walger down for good. Reich doesn't say a word at first. He just gives the kid a sharp, intense look through his glasses while his knights just stand there in the back, looking completely caught off guard by the kid's blunt question. Sold keeps going, saying Reich was probably just watching Dagora this whole time to get the evidence needed to bury the noble, and seeing how much the kid has figured out, a small smile starts to show on Reich's face. He tells Sold he's honestly surprised, because the kid is exactly right about everything. Reich explains that on the surface, the Hartman and Devichip families are supposed to rule the town together in total harmony, but he admits that's all just a big act, and the truth is that both families are just waiting for the perfect chance to wreck each other. Reich talks about how his family has always grown alongside the town of Gust, and while his knights look on with pride, he says that the people living here are the real treasure of his house, so he makes it clear they can't let themselves be beaten by a guy like Walger if they want to protect everyone. Sold sits there with his tea, completely stunned because this guy like Reich is turning out to be full of surprises. The kid remembers that in the original game, Reich always seemed like such a sarcastic and cynical person, and he even recalls how Reich used to tell everyone to show absolutely no mercy to any enemies of the Hartman house. Sold looks at him, wondering if the guy is actually just a really passionate person deep down, and if he's just been trying his best this whole time to do his duty as a young lord. Reich asks Sold to confirm if the guy he beat, Dagora, was actually going after his sister. Sold says yeah, and he adds that Dagora claimed his sister somehow belongs to a group called the Titan. Reich says he figured as much, which completely freaks out his knights. Sold is left wondering what he means by that while the Titans are revealed as this massive, shadowy organization that's secretly running things in the global underworld. Nobody knows when they started or who's really in charge, they're just a dangerous group wrapped in total mystery. Reich looks serious and admits he already had a bad feeling that Walger was mixed up with those people. He explains that Walger is planning to use Sold's sister for some reason, and handing her over would definitely help Walger climb the ranks and get tighter with the organization. If that happens, the corruption in town is just going to get worse, turning everything into a violent mess where nobody's safe. Reich stands there and promises he won't let that happen no matter what, so they need to move fast to stop him. Reich stands by the window with his back turned, telling Sold that he actually has a proposal for him, and Sold repeats the word back, looking a bit surprised before he realizes this proposal must be the whole reason Reich reached out to them in the first place, so he looks him in the eye and asks what the deal actually is. The memory shifts to a total nightmare where a town is being raided and set on fire by bandits, And inside a house, Tilty's mom tells her to run while she stays behind to buy some time. She warns her that a scary darkness is coming and that they're specifically coming after her, but she brushes Tilty's face and tells her it's okay, even if that darkness is the very thing hurting her. She promises that one day a light will definitely show up to wipe all that darkness away for good, so Tilty has to keep moving forward no matter how bad things get, even as she cries out for her mom. Tilty snaps awake in bed with tears in her eyes, calling out for her mother after that intense dream. Tilty finally opens her eyes but feels totally lost, asking where she even is. The nurse standing by the bed tells her she's awake now and explains they're currently staying at the Hartman estate. Tilty spots her dad in the next bed and yells out for him, but the nurse tells her to stay calm. She says as long as Tilty stays quiet and gets some rest, everything is going to be just fine. Looking out at the big house under the moonlight, Tilty asks where her brother went. The nurse lets her know he's busy right now, probably talking things over with Lord Rake, the guy in charge of the house. Someone takes a firm step forward down the hall. It's like he just showed up out of nowhere, exactly when he was needed most. No matter what happened, he was standing right there in front of her, and Tilty realizes that just like her mom promised, he really is there to protect her. She runs to the office and throws the doors open, calling out for her big brother. She looks at Sold standing there and can't help but think of him as the light that saved her. But the mood changes fast when she hears Sold tell the Lord that he wants the Hartman family to take Tilty in and protect her. Tilty stands there frozen, completely blindsided by the idea of being left behind. She looks at him with tears in her eyes and asks what he's even talking about, but just looks over at her and says her timing for showing up was actually perfect. Sold looks up, totally surprised to see Tilty standing in the doorway, and calls out her name stays calm at his desk, telling Tilty her dad is resting and that he's already been going over the situation with Sold. He gets straight to the point, warning Tilty that Walger, the town's marquis, is specifically targeting her. Adjusts his glasses and admits that while the threat is real, he still hasn't figured out why the guy is after her. But since Walger is a high-ranking noble, he's the type who would easily frame her for fake crimes just to get his way. The situation is even worse than they thought, because if Walger goes after her, he might just destroy the whole ranger village, leaving Tilty and Sold standing there in complete silence as the weight of the danger finally hits them. Explains that this is the real reason the Hartman family wants to bring her in. It's the only way to keep her safe from him. He looks her in the eye and makes it clear that he isn't just doing this to be nice to her, because this deal is actually about protecting all the people she lives with back home from being caught in the crossfire. Tilty is completely stunned by the news, barely able to get any words out. She looks over at Sold with tears in her eyes, calling out for her big brother because she doesn't know what to do. Sold stands his ground and tells he finally sees what kind of game he's playing. He points out that even though the offer seems like it's meant to help them, has a much bigger goal in mind, which is making sure he's the one sitting in a more powerful position than Walger. By keeping Tilty under the Hartman family's roof, they hold the one person Walger is desperate to get his hands on, and there's pretty much nothing more annoying for a guy like Walger than being stuck in a spot like this. Because Walger wants to make sure he gets Tilty back safely. His hands are basically tied, meaning he can't risk making any messy moves or picking a fight with the Hartmans without losing everything. Sold realizes that is actually the one in total control here, and he can be as aggressive as he wants while Walger just has to sit there and take it. Sold looks at and realizes the guy sees Tilty as nothing more than a bargaining chip. Catches on that Sold is reading him and realizes he's going to have to stay sharp around the kid. Tilty just stands there looking completely lost while the two of them talk about her future, and Sold starts running the numbers in his head, thinking only about what's going to keep her safe. He wonders if the right move is to actually leave her with and go his own way, or if he should just try to protect her with his own strength, but he decides the best play is to take the deal. He clenches his fist, asking himself which path actually makes her happy and if he's even the one who can do it. Finally, Sold bows his head and tells he understands, asking him to take good care of his sister. Tilty starts tearing up and calls out to him, asking why this is happening and why he's leaving her behind. Sold doesn't say a word, he just looks down, keeping his face hidden while he deals with the choice. Promises that the Hartman family will protect Tilty with everything they've got. Sold bows his head and says thank you, but he adds that he has one condition before they finalize anything. With a huge grin, Sold asks to hire him on the spot, leaving Tilty looking totally surprised beside him. Just stares back at him, looking completely stunned by the kid's request. Even the knights standing in the back can't hide how shocked they are. Sold thinks about the promise he made to himself. He knows he has to be the one who actually protects her, and Tilty finally breaks into a huge, happy smile as she looks at him. Sold just gives her a confident wink to show her he's got it all under control. Stands there for a second, just watching the two of them interact, until he finally smirks and repeats the idea of Sold staying just to protect his sister, sounding pretty impressed. Like says he's down with the plan, but he needs to run the whole thing by someone else first, which turns out to be his younger sister. Sold is pretty caught off guard that a sister is involved, while Tilty just seems stuck on the word discuss, as like asks if they're cool with that. Sold says yeah, but he's confused why the head of the house isn't the one making the call. Like tells them both to just stay put and relax at the mansion until Sold's dad is back on his feet, and later that night, the sound of boots hits the floor as Like walks into a bedroom and calls out to a girl named Siluria. She's just sitting there on a bed full of stuffed animals, and without looking up from her book, she asks her brother if he found the girl he was after. Like gives her a smirk and says he did, confirming that he's got her safely secured just like she said he would. He tells her that her weird clairvoyance power totally worked and caught her right where she predicted. Siluria sits quietly on her bed, a girl who apparently holds the total key to the Hartman family's future, and she tells Like that finding Tilty is good news. But Like mentions, there's actually something else he needs to bring up. He explains that there's a noble boy with Tilty who's actually offering to work for their family, which makes Like curious if Siluria saw him in her visions too, but she says she has no idea who that kid is. Looking deeper with her clairvoyance, she realizes that a boy like Sold doesn't even exist in the future she sees. Like takes this as a red flag and says he's just going to turn the kid down, but as the moon hangs over the mansion, Siluria tells her brother to wait a second, because she thinks there's definitely something weird about that child. She explains that Sold is the first person she's ever come across that her powers completely fail to see, and she's convinced there has to be some big reason why he showed up at their house out of nowhere. Sold stands there with a smile, wondering if he really is some kind of special existence like Siluria thinks, but Siluria is still watching him closely, trying to figure out if he'll bring her family success or total ruin. She decides she's going to be the one to judge him. Meanwhile, out in the middle of nowhere, a dark rift starts tearing through the air. Turns out it was way too early for anyone to celebrate because this creepy dark hole is just sitting there in the woods, giving off some really bad vibes. Back at the house, Sold gets settled into his new life as a guard apprentice for the Hartman family, and he's pretty hyped that Tilty is officially moving into the mansion to live with them from now on. He mentions that his dad was definitely caught off guard by the whole situation, but he gave them his blessing to stay. Garland stands there with his arms crossed and tells the kid he'll handle, explaining everything to his mom. Sold just thanks him for having their backs. So Garland explains that for country nobles like them, getting an in with the high-ranking families is a blessing, but that's not all. He tells Sold that this is a huge chance for both of them, which just leaves the kid wondering what kind of chance his dad is even talking about. Sold brings up the idea of finding a magic stone, and the mention of it catches Garland completely off guard. It turns out those things don't even circulate on the open market, but being connected to a marquis's house now might be their only real shot at finding one. Sold nods along as it clicks for him. He knows that if they can just manage to get their hands on a magic stone, they can finally have a proper sword made for Frey. The goal is to get a blade specifically for Magin-style swordsmanship, something tough enough to actually handle that level of power, because if Sold can pull that off, he knows he'll be able to get way stronger than he is now. Moving on, Garland bows as he prepares to head out, telling Lord Rake that he's leaving the two kids in his hands. Rake tells Garland not to worry and to have a safe trip back, while the kids wave goodbye from the pavement, leaving Sold focused on his main mission of being Tilty's personal bodyguard. He knows that since Walger is still targeting her, she can't really go outside, but other than that, she's pretty much free to do whatever she wants. Life at the mansion has been pretty smooth lately, starting with the great meals they get served every day, and even the time they spend hitting the books in the library. Tilty finally gets some time for entertainment too, playing with the dogs outside while Sold keeps watch. Though Sold realizes he's actually made it through the whole week without any major issues. But then, he notices Siluria hiding behind the walls and staring them down like she has been for days. He's been keeping a close eye on her for a week straight now, and he's starting to get a better idea of who she really is. It turns out she's Siluria Hartman, the sister character from that Imauto-like game he remembers. Seeing her just standing there, Sold starts wondering if he should be the one to finally go up and talk to her, but Tilty beats him to it, calling out as she notices Siluria peeking around the corner. Tilty looks right at her and just asks why she's always watching her from the shadows. Siluria just stands there with a totally blank look on her face, staring right at Tilty like she's looking through her. Suddenly, a weird spiral pattern flashes in Siluria's eye, and she reacts like she just realized something huge. Out of nowhere, Siluria lunges forward and throws her arms around Tilty, leaving Sold standing in the back completely lost. Siluria tells Tilty she needs to come to her room right now, and Tilty is so confused she can't even process what's happening. Siluria says they need to talk and starts dragging Tilty away, while Sold tries to jump in and ask what's going on. Like steps in and tells Sold there's really no need to worry about them, so Sold turns his attention to him instead. Like apologizes for how selfishly his sister is acting and asks Sold to just bear with her for a bit. He explains that once Siluria gets like this, there's no stopping her, which makes Sold wonder what he actually means by that. Outside the mansion, everything looks pretty chill, with the dogs just running around the grass like usual. As they sit down for tea, Like starts explaining the power Siluria has and how it's basically a blessing for the whole Hartman family. Sold wonders about this blessing Like mentioned, and Like explains that Siluria's power has saved him so many times that he actually had to ask her before hiring Sold. Like calls his sister the guiding light for their entire family, and right then, things finally click for Sold as he remembers who Siluria is from the game. He thinks back to how she acted as a guide whenever he got stuck, while playing recalling the old legend about the winds leading the way through the unknown. Sold tries to piece it together, remembering that her specific ability is supposed to show people the exact path they need to take. It's a rare gift, basically giving her the power to see into the future. Sold realizes she really is Like's sister and starts to ask for more details, but Like shuts it down, apologizing and saying her power is a total family secret. Like just says her power is special, which confirms Sold's suspicion that she definitely has the clairvoyance he remembers from the game. It leaves him wondering exactly what kind of things is she seeing with those eyes of hers right now. Nearby, a tray loaded with cupcakes and sandwiches sits ready for a snack, surrounded by a mountain of stuffed animals, and the girls are just hanging out in a room full of plushies, with Siluria and Tilty having their own private tea party away from the guys. Tilty looks a little unsure while they're hanging out and she carefully asks Siluria a question, but Siluria just stares back with those blank eyes and tells Tilty to drop the formal stuff, since honorifics are just a huge pain. Tilty asks why she was even brought to this room in the first place, and Siluria just says she saw the two of them talking, so she decided to bring her here. Siluria adds that she always follows what she sees because it's never wrong, leaving Tilty completely confused about what seeing even means. And then Siluria gets this intense look in her eyes while explaining that everything she does is for the sake of her brother Like. The two of them just sit there in the middle of all those stuffed animals, sharing a quiet moment together as Siluria asks if Tilty is on her side, and Tilty wonders if she means they're officially friends now. Siluria breaks into a huge, genuine smile and talks about how much she really loves her big brother, which makes Tilty look off to the side, softly admitting that she loves her own brother Sold just as much. But her expression turns a little sad as she says that all she ever really does is cause him a bunch of trouble. Tilty looks at her and says she wants to help her own big brother too, just like Siluria does for hers, and Siluria just stares back, her eyes looking clear and focused for a change. Siluria tells her it's totally fine, because as long as she has the will she can make it happen, which makes Tilty wonder if it's all about her feelings. Tilty realized she wished for the same thing once, and that's the exact moment her magic finally woke up, but she was specifically wishing for the power to save her brother while the two girls sit there together. Siluria starts thinking back to when she was little and always spacing out, but her big brother Like was always there, and since their parents were always so busy, he was the one who looked after her and treated her with so much kindness. Even when their parents died in a terrible accident, Like held her tight and promised he'd protect her and their home no matter what. Siluria was happy to have him, but she really wanted to find a way to help him out too, and then the second she made that wish, her special power finally awakened. These strange visions started showing up in her head out of nowhere, over and over again, just random pieces of what was going to happen in the future, specifically things involving the Hartman family, and one of those visions actually saved them when a massive rock came crashing down right where they were standing. It turns out all these flashes of the future were the only reason her brother stayed safe. But Siluria admits she has no clue when her clairvoyance is going to kick in or what it's even going to show her. The only thing she knows for sure is that every person and event she sees ends up helping her brother in the end. That's exactly why she took action back then, sitting in her room full of stuffed animals. She told Like to head to the forest south of Gust to save a girl from a guy with a mohawk. Like recognized the name Dagura immediately and told her he'd handle it. In her vision, all she saw was the little girl and the man with the mohawk, but when the moment actually happened, Sold was right there too, changing everything. Siluria sits in her room surrounded by toys, telling Tilty how she can see Sold's shape, but Tilty just looks on, saying she's the only one who can really decide things like that for her brother. Like stands alone looking out at the lights, wondering if these new people are actually friends or just another set of enemies to deal with. The sun comes up on the Hartman estate the next day, and as Sold and Tilty walk through the halls, Tilty mentions she hasn't seen Siluria around yet. She's pretty confused because Siluria told her she couldn't see Sold at all with her powers. Sold stops to think about how her magic works, specifically that clairvoyance of hers, and it finally clicks for him that for some reason, Siluria can't actually see what's coming in his future. Before he can wrap his head around it, a guard starts shouting for the princess, making both kids jump. Sold asks what the big deal is and the guard panics, saying Lady Siluria is completely gone. One of the older guards looks totally panicked, telling Like that every single vassal is out there searching for the princess right now. Tilty calls out to her brother while Sold steps up, promising Like that the two of them will help with the search too. Outside on the estate grounds, guards are running around everywhere and yelling as the search for Siluria gets more intense. But high up on the very edge of the roof, Siluria is standing all by herself, thinking about how the future she sees has always guided her toward the right path before, even though she looks pretty nervous about what's next. She inches her boot closer to the ledge, convinced that this specific moment is something she was meant to see. And standing there at the highest point of the mansion, she looks out over the clouds while the wind picks up. She suddenly jumps right off the edge with her arms spread out, telling herself she's just going to do whatever she can. As she falls, she just closes her eyes and lets it happen, looking like she's totally at peace with the drop until Sold appears out of nowhere on the roof and catches her by the hand, stopping her fall before things get ugly. Sold screams out Siluria's name as he grabs her, looking completely panicked and asking her what she's doing. Siluria just looks back at him with this blank, confused expression. She can't understand why he's even there. She starts thinking about the vision she had where she was falling through the sky, totally alone. Because, in the future she saw, Sold wasn't anywhere around to help her. She tells him she was just following her vision, which leaves him looking totally lost. She explains that in every single version of the future she's ever seen, the only way to actually save her brother was to take that jump. Sold is completely stunned, barely able to get a word out while down below, Like and the guard are losing it, yelling at Sold to look out because he's still hanging off the edge. Sold snaps at her, saying if anything happened to her, Like would be totally devastated. They stand there together on the roof. Sold looks frustrated while Siluria just stares off, but she doubles down, insisting that whatever she has to do is for the sake of making sure the right future happens. Standing on the high roof, Sold yells out, demanding to know what she even means by a right future. He keeps going, asking if she really thinks that for the sake of some destined path, he's just supposed to sit back while the people he loves fall into despair or face some tragic end. Siluria doesn't say a word. She just stands there with tears streaming down her face as Sold shouts that he's not going to accept anything like that, no matter what. He grabs her hand tight and tells her that the future isn't set, it's something you build yourself in the moment. Siluria's eyes go wide, looking completely shocked by his words because everything finally clicks for Sold, and he realizes why she was never able to see his future in her visions. It's because he's a reincarnator who doesn't belong to this world's original script. And while the original Sold Ranger was destined to die in the game, he's standing right here, very much alive. Sold stands on the edge of the roof and shouts that he's going to make his own future, while Like realizes he doesn't have a set script anymore and Like finally spots them and yells out for Siluria, who turns around and calls back to her big brother. He rushes over and pulls her into a tight hug, looking totally relieved that she's safe and sound. Like looks down and calls her a fool for being so reckless, but he's clearly just worried about her. Siluria just stays quiet, leaning into the hug with tears still rolling down her face. She finally finds her voice and tells her brother she's sorry for everything that happened. Like turns his attention toward the kid and tells Sold that he has his sincere thanks. He admits that he actually heard the entire conversation Sold was having with Siluria earlier. Like agrees with him, saying that the future really is something they have to create for themselves in the present. He decides to make a big move right then and there. He offers Sold an official spot serving the Hartman family, no longer just an apprentice. Sold looks up with a look of pure excitement on his face as he reaches out to shake Like's hand. Like tells him to just call him Reich from now on, and Sold happily agrees, while Siluria watches them bond. Like gives him a look of real respect and tells Sold that he's the savior of his sister and their entire house. Sold just stands there with a proud smile, soaking in the moment until one of the knights comes sprinting over, yelling for the young master. Like tells him to relax since Siluria is safe, and the guy is just relieved she's okay. But the knight isn't done yet. He says there's another problem, reporting that a rift has suddenly appeared in the southern forest. Like and Sold both freeze up, with Like yelling out in total shock at the news. The mood shifts instantly as Like gets this intense look, saying that the day has finally come. Sold starts to panic, asking if it's really a rift, while thinking to himself that this matches exactly what happened in the game. Like confirms that things have gotten messy, explaining that a portal to the demon realm has just opened up. The sky literally splits open as the knight yells that an outbreak is starting from the magic dimension, a rift that Sold recognizes instantly, staring at the crack in the sky and realizing this is the huge chance he needs to finally make his move. He remembers Frey saying the magic dimension is a world of beasts and pure energy, which is the only place where magic ore can grow strong enough to hold any spell. Those ores are the magic stones that Sold is after, because he knows he has to get his hands on the magic stone sword if he wants to have the kind of power that actually matters. To him, a sword is the only way to protect the people he cares about, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to secure a better future for Tilty. Looking back at the rift, the massive opening to the magic dimension stands there like a wound in the world. It's basically a completely different realm that's just overflowing with mana, the source of all magical power, creating a totally unique and dangerous ecosystem that doesn't follow any of the rules from the human world. In this world, all the crazy beasts and plants are completely nurtured by mana, and it turns out that moderate amounts of mana just become magical power. In normal doses, it doesn't even affect humans, but once the mana levels go past what a body can take, it starts causing heavy dizziness and nausea, which only gets worse from there in the absolute worst-case scenario that much mana can actually be fatal. Like points out that according to the reports, the mana concentration inside this specific magic dimension is through the roof. To make sure nobody gets mana poisoning, he decides that only he and the elites with high mana capacity are going in. Like turns to his team and asks Zweig and Audrey if they're ready to move, and they shout back that they're set while Zweig gives a big smile, telling the young master she's got his back. Then Audrey steps up with total loyalty, saying his entire life belongs to House Hartman. Finally, Like tells Ainz he's leaving the estate in his hands, and the commander tells him not to worry about a thing. Sold looks over the stats for the area, checking out the magic power levels and the magicule concentration. It's exactly like the game, where the dungeon has a level 20 requirement just to step inside. Since the concentration is so high, anyone too weak can't even enter, which makes Sold realize just how much a high concentration actually matters. He starts wondering if this place is going to be crazy dangerous, and right then, Like tells him he can't possibly take a child into a magic dimension like this. Sold loses it, thinking he's getting left behind, but Like stops and says that's only what he'd normally say to a kid. Sold is just standing there totally confused, so Like looks over at his team and mentions that Sold is definitely not like other kids. He looks for some backup from the others. Zweig immediately jumps in, reminding everyone how the kid dropped Dagora in one hit. Audrey agrees, saying that ice swordsmanship put out a staggering amount of power. Even Ainz speaks up, saying that even if the boy can't use magic himself, that magic sword is going to be a huge asset for the team. Like admits it's still pretty hard to believe, but he can't ignore the fact that his 3 best elites are all vouching for him. He looks Sold right in the eye and says it's a dangerous place, but asks if he'll lend them his strength anyway. Sold is all in, shouting yes. As he agrees to help Like out with the dungeon raid, he's thinking that if he can just score a magic stone in there, he can finally build a sword that won't break when he uses his full power. But before they head out, he turns back to Tilty and calls her name, looking a little worried about leaving her. She just looks back at him with this really calm, sweet smile on her face. Tilty tells him not to worry about her while he's gone, and it totally catches Sold by surprise. She mentions that Siluria and the others will be there to protect her. While Siluria just flashes a peace sign, Sold pulls Tilty into a hug, promising her that he definitely won't lose since he's got a promise to keep. With the whole squad watching, Tilty tells him she's going to work on getting stronger herself while he's away, and the two of them just stand there for a second, smiling and trusting each other. Finally, Tilty, Siluria, and Like all wave the group off as they head out toward the magic dimension. The squad is all fired up and ready to go. With Sold and the knights heading out, a horse carriage leaves the city of Gust behind, making its way toward the south forest as the group treks deep into a thick, overgrown woods where the path gets pretty rough. As they walk, Sold looks around and asks Like if this kind of thing happens a lot, but Like admits it's actually his first time too, explaining that the demon dimension is basically just a random disaster. He goes on to say that these rifts open up by total accident and just keep getting bigger, and all sorts of scary magical beasts start pouring out of the holes once they're open. If they just leave it be, the whole area will get trashed and everyone living there will be in trouble, so they really have no choice but to close the rift before things get way worse. Like points out that this specific rift popped up right in the middle of his family's territory. Like keeps talking as they walk, explaining that if this rift messes things up, his family takes the fall, and since there's no way the opposition will let that slide, Sold asks if he's talking about Walger de Vihip. Like confirms it, saying Walger will definitely try to blast the Hartman name for bringing danger to the town, mostly just so he can claim they aren't fit to run the city of Gust anymore. As they pass a waterfall, Like mentions that even though these demon dimensions are a total pain, they do have one perk, and that's the crazy amount of rare resources they can find inside. He's talking about special plants, monster materials, and ores that nobody can get in the human world. It's so profitable that some nobles actually pray for these rifts to open up just so they can get rich. But he adds that all that money is only a factor if you're strong enough to actually clear the place out, right as some guards spot them, yelling that they've been waiting for like before leading the way. The group finally makes it to the massive rift, a jagged tier hanging in the air that marks the entrance to the demon dimension. Sold starts looking around and gets this weird feeling, asking if this spot is actually what he thinks it is. One of the knights tells him he's spot on. It's the exact same place where Sold fought and beat Dagura not too long ago. The energy around the rift is heavy, looking like a giant mouth waiting to swallow them whole. Sold can't shake the feeling that something is off, wondering if it's really just a coincidence that a rift opened up right here. And like brings up the fact that they actually got reports about Dagura's frozen body disappearing from this very spot. Mobrib confirms it, saying that by the time any soldiers got here to check, the body was gone and this crazy rift had taken its place. Zweig tries to keep things chill, telling like not to worry since Dagura was definitely dead, and she asks Sold to back her up. Sold says they all saw it happen, but like figures Walger probably sent someone to grab the body just to cover his tracks. With the mystery still hanging over them, everyone locks in and like gives the word for the team to finally head inside. Like shouts that it's finally time to take down the demon dimension, and the whole crew lets out a loud cheer as they head into the rift. Back at the mansion, Siluria asks Tilty about this dark power she mentioned, and Tilty says that ever since she was a kid, her magic would just act up whenever she felt down. Her mom called it the power of darkness, which honestly sounds pretty terrifying since Tilty admits she can't control it and usually just blacks out when it starts taking over. She looks away, saying she's convinced this weird power of hers just brings bad luck to everyone she actually gives a damn about. Siluria just watches her for a second, then tells her that power isn't actually bad on its own, it's just that people are the ones who decide what it's used for, and she gets it, because her clairvoyance used to freak her out back in the day too. Turns out Like was the one who gave her that advice when she was little, helping her deal with being different. And she finishes by saying any power can be evil if you're a jerk, but used the right way, it can actually make people happy. Siluria wraps up her advice by telling Tilty that using her power the right way is what brings happiness. And Tilty takes it to heart, asking if that's really how it works before smiling and saying she finally gets it. She gives a little wink and thanks Siluria, promising that she's not going to let her powers scare her anymore. Determined to make everyone happy with her dark magic, she announces she's going to start some special training right away. Moving on to the battle, a weird war cry about being happy rings out as the crew fights off plant monsters. And Sold jumps right into the middle of the action, letting out a loud shout as he swings his blade in a massive arc that catches every monster in its path. The creatures don't even stand a chance, screeching as they get shredded by the force of his slash. Like stands back and watches the whole thing, thinking to himself that Sold's skills are just on another level, and he figures that since Sold can't use magic, he must have put every ounce of effort into becoming a master with the sword. Like keeps watching Sold, thinking about how much time the guy must have spent just training with his blade to get that good. But the moment is cut short when a winged monster drops from the sky with a loud screech, catching Like totally off guard. Zweig jumps into action immediately, calling out her Aqua Lance spell and sending a huge blast of water straight into the monster, making it scream as it gets blasted back while she moves in to cover Like. She yells over to Audrey to back her up, and he lets out a shout, ready to bring the hammer down. Audrey triggers his rock hammer skill, slamming the ground so hard that giant jagged stone spikes tear right through the remaining monsters, finishing them off while they let out one last pathetic cry. Everything goes quiet for a second as the dust and smoke from the magic attacks slowly start to clear out. Audrey checks in on Like to make sure he's alright, and after Like says he's fine, Audrey mentions that the area finally seems clear, but then Like suddenly starts groaning and clutching his head, making Sold realize something is definitely wrong. Sold and the knights panic as Like suddenly doubles over, yelling out his name as he hits the ground. They get him settled with some medicine, but Like just sits there looking totally ashamed, apologizing for being a family head who can't even handle a little magic sickness. Sold stands by him and asks why he's even trying to go to the demon dimension anyway, suggesting that as a leader, he really shouldn't be pushing himself this far. Like looks down and agrees that it's true, but he feels like he can't just sit back and give orders while staying safe and protected behind everyone else. He tells Sold straight up that he never wanted to be that kind of leader, which leaves Sold looking pretty surprised by how much the guy is carrying, especially since Like grew up watching his father, a man who was always at the very front of the line leading his people with a sword in his hand. It wasn't just the people in the Hartman house who loved him either. The whole town would gather around just to catch a glimpse of him and cheer his name. Everyone was drawn to how brave his father was, following him through anything while they shouted for the family to live long, and Like admits with a sad smile that he admired the man more than anything, and his only real goal was to grow up and be exactly like him. He was working hard to become that kind of leader. But then everything changed when his parents suddenly died in an accident, leaving him to carry the weight of the family name all by himself. Like explains that he ended up taking over as the family head when he was still just a little kid. He tried his best to act tough back then, but when he looks at the reality of it, he knows he was only getting by because everyone else was saving him. Even the house staff had to prop him up, and it wasn't just them. He admits he was even being saved by his own little sister, Siluria. He realizes now that he was always the one stuck in the back of the line while everyone else stood in front to keep him safe, leaving him clenching his fists in total frustration. He tells Sold how pathetic he felt and that he just couldn't forgive himself for being that way. Like sits there on his gear with his head in his hands, looking completely defeated while Sold just stands there watching him. He says that even though he was stubborn enough to come all the way to the demon dimension, he still ended up useless because of this magic sickness. He's starting to believe he'll never be strong like his father was, but Sold speaks up and tells him that's not true at all. Like looks over, surprised to hear him jump in like that. Sold tells him that everyone is weak, especially someone like himself who can't even use a single lick of magic. He looks down, admitting that he often feels like a worthless character, with no real purpose other than being someone who needs protection. Sold tells Like he has to believe that change is possible and shouts for him to master the sword, and it all comes down to having a heart that believes, just like when Sold's dad used to watch him train in the rain. Sold grips his blade with a confident look, knowing that this mindset is what keeps him going. Nearby, Siluria keeps her eyes shut in prayer while Tilty stands right behind her, watching the moment unfold. Like thinks over the word believe, and tells Sold that he finally gets what he's saying. Sold explains that real strength comes from a person's desire, and it only works if they truly believe in it, so Like thanks Sold for the advice and says he's going to give it a shot. He's ready to start believing that even someone like him has the potential to become strong. He wants to be someone people can be proud of, just like his father was, which puts a big smile on Sold's face. Just then Zweig and Audrey come running back to the group. Like calls out to them and asks how everything went on their side. Zweig tells Like it's just a straight shot from here, and she looks pretty confident about it, so Audrey adds that this magic dimension seems to have a pretty simple layout compared to others they've seen. Like starts explaining to Sold that these dungeon dimensions are basically just distortions from another world, and they usually look like tiny, weirdly shaped gardens that are different every single time one of them pops up. Ainz points toward a jagged area ahead, says there's a big dome further in where the core is probably sitting, but Sold wonders what a core even is, so Like tells him it's the heart of the whole magical dimension. He explains that the entire space is made of packed magic energy, and all that power is generated by the core. The core's appearance changes depending on the place. Sometimes it looks like a plant or maybe a magic stone, and it can even show up as a magic beast, just a monster with the core inside it. Like finishes the lesson by saying that if you wreck the core, the rift to this world finally closes. Ainz tries to keep things light by saying these simple cores usually aren't that big of a deal, so Like tells the group to get moving while Sold follows along, but Like stays serious, telling the crew not to drop their guard for a second, especially calling out Sold to stay sharp. Sold gets a bad feeling because back in the games he played, high magic density always meant trouble, and the level on this core was way up there. The whole place is a mess of swirling white energy and jagged edges as they push deeper into the distortion, reaching a massive open area where the group looks like tiny specks against the huge walls of the rift. Audrey looks around the empty space and mentions that he doesn't see anything that looks like a core anywhere. Like agrees, saying there aren't any signs of a magic beast around either, but Sold starts to notice something off, and his eyes go wide as he realizes the danger is coming from a different direction. He screams for everyone to look up. The whole group stops dead in their tracks, looking up in total shock as a massive shadow starts to drop down on them, and Zweig can't even find her words while Ainz stares up, saying they've got to be kidding with the size of the thing coming at them. Like hits the ground, looking completely terrified, and just barely manages to say that the thing in front of them is a monster so big that Sold and the knights look like bugs next to its massive wings and tail. It's a three-eyed black dragon, and it lets out a roar that shakes the whole place. Zweig realizes it's the legendary dragon from the stories, while Ainz yells out that they're facing a real black dragon. Like starts to spiral, sweating like crazy and asking how he's even supposed to take down a core that's actually a giant monster, but Sold steps up with his sword ready, telling Like he just needs to believe in him. The kid looks totally locked in, promising that no matter what kind of enemy they're up against, they are going to win. His voice echoes through the cavern as he tells the whole group they aren't losing this fight. Sold levels his blade and gets into a perfect stance, looking ready for anything, and Zweig tells Like the kid is right, while Ainz backs him up, saying if the dragon is the core then they've just gotta do it. The black dragon stands its ground and lets out a roar that rattles the whole cave, and someone tries to tell the thing to wait, but it's clearly not interested in talking. It opens its mouth wide and just floods the entire place with a massive wave of dark flames. Sold and the knights stand together against the heat. They're totally stuck as the fire closes in, so a voice calls out for a water wall to block the blast, and a huge splash of magic hits the fire. Sold yells out to Zweig, who's currently holding the shield and can't believe how strong these flames actually are. Zweig realizes her magic is hitting its limit and tells the guys she can't hold it for much longer, which prompts a shout for everyone to get back as the dragon gears up for another strike. But Sold just looks annoyed. He's done waiting around and gets ready to make his move. He lets out a loud yell as the whole room explodes in a mess of fire and magic. The dragon looks up in total shock as a massive strike comes down. It never saw it coming, and a blinding light washes over everything as the hit lands right on the beast's head. Sold realizes this isn't just about Tilty anymore. He finally understands the real trick to using his power, so he shouts that he's doing this to protect his friends and unleashes his water wolf technique in one fast flash. The knights are losing it over his magic ice sword. While Like can't believe the kid froze the whole dragon, the monster is stuck like a statue in a thick layer of ice, completely shut down for now. Like just stands there watching Sold, thinking about how this kid's power is actually insane. He starts getting in his own head, admitting he was so scared that his body just wouldn't move. Like clenches his fist until it shakes. He's feeling pretty pathetic for being the only one who froze up, but Sold yells out that they aren't done yet, keeping his guard up as he gets ready for the next round. Sold looks at the massive frozen block and asks if the black dragon is still alive, and just then the monster shatters the ice into a million pieces. It stands tall and lets out a roar that shakes everything while the sound of its screaming fills the air, showing off rows of sharp teeth as it wakes back up. The dragon narrows its eye and stares them down, shaking its head to finally clear off the rest of the frost. Seeing the beast ready to strike, one of the knights calls for a rock wall. A giant stone barrier slams into place, keeping the group hidden for the moment. Audrey says they can stay out of sight for a bit, but he tells Like they've got no chance of winning. Sold doesn't give up though, telling them they just need to find the dragon's weak point, which totally catches Like off guard. Sold says he knows what he's talking about, remembering how this beast was a total nightmare back in the game world, and there's one specific spot they need to focus on: the reverse scale. He explains that weak hits won't even scratch its armor, which is exactly why they never could take it down before. Sold recalls that hitting the reverse scale on the dragon's throat is the key. It's the only way to deal enough damage to actually take it down. Like realizes what that means and starts to worry about how they're supposed to get close enough, because getting past those massive flames is going to be a total nightmare. The group stays low behind the rocks while Ainz turns to Sold and asks if they can really count on him for this. Audrey reminds him that he has to land one perfect heavy hit right on that weak spot. Zweig promises they'll give him all the support they can, and Audrey says the knights will act as decoys so Sold can get the opening he needs. Sold agrees to the plan, but he looks down at his weapon and brings up a major problem: his sword might not hold up. Zweig offers him hers instead, but since the blade breaks whenever he uses a high-level move, Sold knows they really only have one shot at this. He tells them he's going to make it count, but just as he's about to move, Like tells them to wait. Everyone stops and looks over at him, standing there in the middle of the cave with the dragon still looming nearby, and Like looks them in the eye with a serious face. He says he wants to help out with the fight too. The knights are completely floored by Like's request, yelling out in total disbelief. They try to talk him out of it, saying there is no way he should be putting himself in that kind of danger, especially since Audrey is terrified of what might happen if the young master gets hurt. He tells Like that if anything happened to him, it would be the end of everything, but Like just clenches his fist tight, shaking a little as he says he knows exactly what's at stake. He understands the danger, but he can't just stand by while everyone else fights. And then Sold speaks up and cuts through the tension, telling Like straight up that he believes in him. He looks Like in the eye and suggests they just go for it and fight the dragon together as a team. The knights watch on as Sold holds his ground, and Like finally breaks into a confident smile, giving a simple nod and agreeing to the plan. Sold smiles back, both of them ready to give it everything they've got, which makes the knights feel pretty emotional seeing the young master step up like this. They can't help but feel a bit of pride, even though one of the veteran knights just grunts to hide how he's actually feeling. He tries to stay focused on the mission, but then everything goes south in a second. Someone screams for them to look out as Audrey suddenly shoves Sold and Like out of the way, because the dragon crashes down, its massive jaws snapping at everyone. Like realizes they've been spotted and says they finally found them. While the knights scramble into position, and one of them starts things off by calling out an aqua chain spell that sends water swirling everywhere. Then he follows up with a rock lock move, forcing huge chunks of stone to burst out of the earth and the water chains wrap tight around the dragon's head, keeping its jaws shut while the heavy rocks slam down on its claws to keep it from moving an inch. The dragon lets out a muffled roar, while the knight uses every bit of strength he has to keep the monster grounded. And then he looks over and tells Sold to make his move immediately because he's struggling to keep the dragon pinned, and says he can't hold this magic for much longer. Sold shouts back that he's on it, gripping his sword tight as he steps up and starts running toward the beast, knowing exactly where he needs to hit the reverse scale. Sold finally spots the glowing reverse scale right on the dragon's neck, and he lunges forward, shouting that it's right there as he puts everything into one strike. The dragon flinches hard from the impact, but instead of going down, it blasts off into the air, creating a massive shockwave that sends dirt and rocks flying everywhere. The knights are caught off guard, with one of them barely able to believe how fast it moved, and another soldier panics immediately, seeing their target slip away into the sky. Like yells for everyone to look out, swearing under his breath as he realizes they've lost the advantage. Up above, the dragon lets out a low growl, looking down at the knights who are just standing there swearing, and one of the men admits he feels completely useless now that the beast is out of reach. The dragon stares back with its cold, slit eye, just waiting for the right moment to finish them. Like clenches his teeth, feeling totally useless because he couldn't do a single thing to stop the beast. And just as he's beating himself up, his eyes go wide, catching a glimpse of something that stops him in his tracks. He sees Sold standing out there alone and loses it, screaming at the kid to get out of there and run for his life, but Sold doesn't even flinch. He just stands his ground with this calm look on his face, looking back at like he's got everything under control. The kid says he actually believes in him, which is the last thing Like expected to hear right now. Like just stares back, completely stunned into silence by the kid's confidence. Meanwhile, the dragon is hovering right above them, opening its massive jaws as a bright light starts to gather in its throat. It lets out a huge blast of energy that slams into the earth with enough power to wreck everything in sight, and a massive cloud of dust and smoke kicks up, completely hiding the ground while the dragon watches from above. The beast looks down through the haze, baring its teeth and waiting to see if anything survived that hit. Sold drops from the sky like a literal meteor, aiming his blade right at the dragon. Like watches with his heart in his throat, yelling out that he's counting on the kid to end this. They move together in one final push, the pressure building as Sold lines up the shot. Sold screams back that he's on it, his face showing he's not backing down for a second. He swings with everything he's got, letting out a massive strike that carves right through the beast. The dragon doesn't even have time to react before the power of the hit completely wrecks it. The massive creature finally hits the ground, kicked up in a cloud of dust and smoke as the fight ends. The knights nearby lose it, cheering about how they actually won and how the teamwork was just on another level. Sold just gives a little laugh, telling Like that the victory belongs to him for holding things together. But Like isn't having it, telling the kid that he's the real reason they're all still standing. Like stands there looking down, admitting he wanted to be brave, but his legs just froze up in front of that dragon. But watching Sold jump into the fight without a single doubt gave him the courage he needed. He tells the kid that seeing him stand fearlessly before such a monster was exactly the kind of hero he always looked up to, and as he thanks him, Sold just blushes from all the praise. The knights laugh it off, saying a broken sword is a tiny price for killing a dragon, and Like even offers up his own blade since the beast is finally down for good. So they start heading out. Sold stops, looking back like he felt a chill down his spine, and he's right, the dragon's eyes snap open and it's staring again. Dark energy pulses through its scales, looking way worse than before, and Sold loses it, wondering how it's still moving when he aimed right for its weak point. Sold realizes he totally underestimated the black dragon. He knows this is about as bad as it gets, so as the flames close in, his mind starts racing with a million different thoughts. Like and the others can only watch and scream, but Sold doesn't even have time to think. His body just moves on its own, and in that moment the dragon lets out a massive blast of fire that should have wiped everyone out on the spot. Ainz grabs Like to pull him down while Audrey watches the inferno wash over them, but somehow Like screams out for Sold, thinking there's no way the kid could have survived a direct hit like that. From high above, the dragon's breath looks like it's swallowing the whole area, but a small bubble is holding firm, and even the dragon looks confused as the fire starts swirling and pulling away from the target, leaving the knights staring in shock. Audrey asks what's even happening as Like notices the fire is acting like it's being pulled right into a single point. All that heat and energy starts converging on Sold like he's a human vacuum. Like stares at the center of the blast. He can't believe his eyes and yells out because Sold is standing right in the middle of the heat. He realizes this is just like his fight with Fenrir, sensing that the dragon is definitely using demonic power, so he grips his sword tight. Right then, he gets a sudden spark of inspiration for a brand new move and starts laughing like a madman. He says this is the best feeling ever as the dark energy swirls around his body. Like screams Sold's name while the knights just watch in total shock. Audrey can't even wrap his head around it, asking if the kid really just absorbed all those flames, and like realizes Sold literally turned the fire into a new blade. Sold actually thanks the Black Dragon, telling the beast that because of this attack, he's managed to evolve and get even stronger. He looks like a completely different person with those marks on his face, standing there with a huge grin. The dragon roars in total frustration while Sold just keeps his cool, he's ready. Like and his knights are completely stunned by what they're seeing. Like wonders what kind of insane power Sold is actually hiding, because nobody should be able to turn a dragon's breath into a sword like that. Sold just gives a calm look. He's fully locked in now, ready to show everyone what his demon god style is truly capable of. Sold stands there with those dark marks on his face, feeling the power. He mentions he's finally starting to figure out how to trigger this new ability, explaining that he first has to get into a specific stance, and then actually catch the enemy's attack head-on. But as he thinks about it, he realizes that just taking a hit isn't enough to make it work. There's a deeper mental side to it, since he knows he has to have the drive to protect himself and everyone he cares about. He holds his ground as the dragon lets out another massive blast of energy, aiming right for him. The whole area erupts in a huge explosion, creating a blinding flash. Like completely loses it and screams out Sold's name, thinking the kid just got vaporized, but Sold is still focused. He realizes there's even more to this power, feeling the demon god style living deep inside his own body. He calls the move Ice Wolf Flash, explaining that the sword now carries a blade of ice that freezes anything it touches. It's like the sword has the ice, but his own body holds the instinct that actually hunts down the prey. Sold can feel a new power waking up, thinking about what's actually dwelling inside his sword. It's like he has the speed of a wolf inside his own body, and his eyes go sharp as he gets ready to swoop down from the sky to strike. He realizes he's now carrying the Black Dragon's own blade of flame, so he launches himself forward, calling out the Luck Dragon, Black Dragon's flame wings. He lets out a massive yell as his whole body turns into a streak of fire, looking just like a dragon cutting across the sky with insane speed and leaving a trail behind. The dragon sees it coming, but it's too slow to react, and Sold screams at the beast to eat its own flames. He slams into the dragon's neck with everything he's got, and a giant pillar of fire explodes upward, blowing the dragon's head back and completely wrecking the place. Like and the knights are absolutely losing it with excitement, cheering as loud as they can because Sold's blade is totally snapped off at the handle. He really put everything into that last hit, leaving him standing in the middle of all that smoke, pumping his fist and celebrating the big win. The Black Dragon, which was the core of this whole demon dimension, finally starts to burn away into nothing, and as the dust settles, the whole group just stands there trying to catch their breath. Sold looks over at Like with a huge grin, while Like just looks completely stunned by the kid's power. When the dragon vanishes, it leaves behind this massive magic stone that's glowing right in front of them. So Audrey asks Like what something that huge is even worth, and Ein says it would easily sell for at least $1 billion. Sold stares at the giant magic stone and realizes that with a find like this, he can actually do it. He knows he can finally make the sword he's been planning. Sold thinks about how happy Tilty is going to be with the gift and tells her to just wait. While back at the Hartman estate, the focus shifts to Tilty, who is currently straining with everything she's got, barely able to keep a pained sound from escaping as she tries to handle a massive swirl of dark energy. Siluria cheers her on, but Tilty just grunts that she's putting every bit of control she has into it. Siluria says she's almost got it, but then Tilty finally hits her limit and gasps for air, watching as the dark power she was trying to shape just shatters into a bunch of tiny pieces. She drops to her knees, breathing hard and hating that she failed again, so Siluria tries to get her to take a break since she's been training forever. But Tilty just looks up and says she's going to keep going because her big brother is working hard, and she needs to keep up. Siluria tells Tilty she's being way too stubborn about her training, so Tilty just laughs it off and says she's sorry for being that way. But then, a massive explosion rocks the entire building. Siluria lets out a scream as the walls shake and dust starts falling everywhere. Siluria points toward the window and says the noise came from outside, making Tilty wonder what's even going on. Down in the garden, a huge cloud of smoke and debris covers the entrance where the gate used to be, showing the Hartman Knights scattered all over the ground, barely able to groan as they lie in the dirt. Commander Ein stares at the smoke in total shock, saying it's impossible because the guy standing there was supposed to be dead. Turns out it's Dagura, and he looks like a complete monster walking through the fire with his hand glowing with heat. He's got this creepy grin on his face as he looks around the estate, asking where his target is hiding. Dagura calls someone a damn brat and says he's definitely going to kill them this time, and then he reaches out with his scorched hand to grab another guard, showing off a weird bracelet covered in eyeballs. Tilty's brother stands in a wasteland, looking at the frozen body of Dagora and telling him it's time to wake up. He says he's going to give him a gift as Dagora's face stays locked in a silent scream behind the ice reaching out. He says he's using the power of darkness to fight against the darkness, and then the creepy bracelet covered in eyeballs latches onto Dagora's wrist. Dagora groans as he hits the ground, and Tilty's brother asks if he's finally back among the living, looking up at his savior. Dagora calls him master while being warned that this is his absolute last chance. With a cold look in his eye, Tilty's brother gives the final order to go and kill that brat. Dagora can feel the power just overflowing through his body, telling his master he doesn't even need to say it because he lets out a massive roar, screaming that he's definitely going to kill him this time, standing right outside the Hartman estate. He yells for Saldo to come out because he knows the kid is hiding inside. Dagora raises his hand as dark energy blasts outward, the eyeball bracelet on his wrist glowing with power. His face is twisted with rage as he yells that he's going to blow everything in his path away. The ground starts shattering under the pressure. Siluria watches in fear while Tilty screams at him to stop. Siluria tries to tell him that her brother isn't around, but Tilty steps up and says she won't let anyone hurt the Hartman. Dagora just laughs with a creepy grin, calling Tilty the priestess of darkness and saying he's been waiting to see her. He leans in close, mockingly asking her to show him that dark power of hers just one more time. Tilty tells Siluria to stay back and says she's sorry they're in this mess, but the younger girl tells her not to apologize. Siluria explains that even though her visions brought Tilty to the mansion as part of some set fate, everything is different now, catching Tilty completely off guard with how serious she's acting. Looking Tilty right in the eyes, Siluria promises to protect her because she's choosing her own destiny from now on. Tilty looks at the young girl, saying Siluria's name as she sees the kid's newfound resolve. But over on the other side of the broken ground, Dagora just starts laughing at the idea of her protecting anyone. The guy loses his patience and yells for them to shut their mouths. Swinging his arm to launch a strike, Tilty reacts fast and calls out her air wall, surrounding them both in a swirling shield of wind. She doesn't just block though, she sends the massive vortex of air slamming right back into Dagora. Dagora's face twists with rage as he tells the brat not to underestimate him. He lets out a massive explosion of energy that completely wrecks the area, making Siluria scream. Tilty ends up face down in the dirt, groaning in pain, while Siluria calls out to her in a panic. But Dagora is already there, reaching through the smoke to grab Siluria by the collar like it's nothing. He leans in with a creepy grin, telling the priestess it's time to finally hand over all that dark power. Dagora keeps a tight grip on Tilty, yelling at her to finally hand over that ultimate power. But Siluria screams for her to stop, while Dagora threatens to kill every single one of them if he doesn't get what he wants. The guy just stands there laughing as a massive wave of dark energy starts swirling around the area. He's totally losing it, drooling and obsessed with the feeling of the power of darkness finally showing up. Siluria ends up trapped right in the middle of the surge, crying out Tilty's name from the center of the chaos. Tilty looks over and sees a vision of her mom telling her everything is going to be okay. It gives Tilty the push she needs, and even with tears in her eyes, she tells herself she can handle this. Siluria looks up in total shock, just staring at Tilty as the whole atmosphere starts to shift. Tilty stands her ground and says she isn't scared of the dark anymore because she's going to be the one in control. The dark energy responds to her, spiking up from the ground in huge, sharp waves around Siluria. Tilty is completely overwhelmed as voices of pain and sadness flood her mind, making her feel like she can't take it anymore, finally letting out a huge scream as she clutches her head in the middle of the dark surge. Siluria runs toward her, calling her name while Tilty collapses to her knees, barely able to keep it together while her mind feels like it's literally breaking apart. But she still manages to tell Siluria that she's okay. It turns out this dark power is reacting directly to all the bad stuff Tilty is feeling right now, and she realizes that if she ever wants to actually control this energy, she has to win the fight against her own emotion. She's honestly terrified that all the sadness and suffering she's been through might just be too much to get past, but even as Dagora holds her captive, she reaches out to the darkness and asks it for a favor. With tears running down her face, she begs the power not to become something that just causes more misery, and instead, she prays for it to change into a power that can actually bring happiness to everyone. Dagora looks completely freaked out and asks what's even happening right now, as the darkness starts gathering around them in a huge wave while he's still holding onto Tilty. Suddenly, these massive shadow hands shoot out of the ground and snatch Dagora up, and he starts losing it, yelling about something grabbing his arm as the shadows wrap around him. Tilty stands her ground and screams at the darkness, telling it that it needs to listen to her, and then she just lets it rip, blasting Dagora back with a surge of energy that makes him scream. Siluria is just sitting there on the ground, totally stunned by what she's seeing, But she gets this small smile on her face and whispers that Tilty actually managed to overcome it. Watching Tilty stand tall against the dark power, Siluria realizes she's actually controlling the darkness, and Tilty puts her hands together with a look of pure focus, saying she's way stronger than all this sorrow. Dagora is completely trapped in the shadow's grip and starts losing it, yelling for the thing to let him go. Tilty doesn't back down, calling on the darkness to trap him as she puts everything she has into the spell. Watching the whole thing through a magic crystal ball, a mysterious guy finds the display pretty impressive. The masked man stands there saying that this is definitely the real power of the Priestess of Darkness, but he knows there's a lot more to it, thinking about how the Abyss of Darkness is still way too deep to understand. He just stares and says Tilty's name, almost like he's expecting even more to happen. Back at the fight, Dagora is screaming in pain as the shadows squeeze him, and Tilty just tells him to give up already. Siluria is watching from the sidelines with a big smile, totally blown away by how amazing Tilty is being. Dagora's face is twisted in a huge scream as the power of the darkness starts to completely overwhelm him, until he can barely make a sound, with only his hand sticking out as he gets swallowed up by the shadows. A creepy arm covered in eyes reaches out from the darkness, grabbing for whatever is left. Then a massive explosion of energy rips through the area, sending Tilty stumbling back as she screams. Siluria tries to shield her eyes, saying the darkness is overwhelming and she can't believe they got blown away, while Tilty sits there on the ground, just trying to figure out what the hell just happened. Both of them look up at the sky and see a small, winged shape hovering way above them, leaving this demonic-looking monster with wings and way too many eyes just floating there with a nasty smile. The creature glares down at Tilty, calling her a brat and telling her straight up that he's going to kill her. Siluria stares at the beast in shock, barely able to get the words out that the thing is actually flying, but Tilty looks even more worried, saying Dagora's name and realizing that thing isn't him at all. She watches the monster hovering over them, saying it's pretty clear that whatever they're looking at isn't human. The monster just smiles and tells her to die, reaching out with a massive clawed hand, while Siluria screams at the top of her lungs for Tilty to just get out of there. Tilty's eyes go completely wide as she realizes she can't move in time, but then Sold and Like suddenly fly into the scene, with Sold yelling for him to stop. The two of them land hard as a huge explosion of dust and light clears the area, and Siluria looks up at them with a giant smile, feeling totally relieved that help finally arrived. Tilty looks over at them too, her face lighting up now that the guys are standing between her and that thing. Siluria shouts out to her big brothers Sold and Reich, asking if the two of them are actually okay. Eventually the rift to the demon world closes for good, and the group starts heading back to town. One of the knights yells something from the front of the carriage, while Sold and Like sit in the back. The group sees smoke rising from the mansion as they get closer to the city. Everyone gets together outside the walls to figure out a plan. So Sold explains that he and Like decided to fly ahead of the rest using Like's wind magic. Once they arrive, Sold asks how Dagora is back from the dead, while Like looks at the gross beast and wonders what it is. But then Siluria grabs onto her brother and tells him that Dagora was wearing a really creepy bracelet. She says that right after the thing started glowing weirdly, Dagora completely changed into that monster. Sold realizes this item was in the game and wonders if it's actually a cursed object. It turns out it's a cursed tool that can actually turn a person into a demon, and the whole group is caught off guard when a raspy voice laughs and calls Sold a brat for finally showing up. The monster stands there in the dust, just repeating that it's going to kill Sold over and over again. Dagora lets out a scream for everyone to die and fires a massive wave of dark energy, Like yells for them to dodge it, while Sold grabs Siluria to pull her out of the way. And the monster just stands there watching the destruction as his power lights up the whole area. Everyone stops and stares at the massive dust cloud where the blast hit. But then the force of the explosion completely wrecks the grounds and sends debris flying everywhere. Like can't believe what's happening to his manor, and Tilty says she can't even get over how much magic power is coming off this guy. Siluria calls for her brother, and Sold clenches his fist. He's stuck wishing he actually had a sword to fight back with. Suddenly a hand reaches out and tells Sold to take the sword he's holding, catching everyone off guard. They all yell for Ainz. He's standing there covered in blood, barely holding on while he asks Like and Siluria to forgive him. Like and Sold call out his name one last time, just as the old man loses his strength and collapses right there. Sold grips the sword handle and thinks to himself that things would be different if he'd just finished it properly. Like yells for everyone to focus on the wounded, but Siluria can only stare at Sold in shock as he steps up. Sold tells them he's taking this fight on himself, and Siluria just watches her big brother walk toward the monster. Siluria tries to stay calm, telling Tilty it's going to be okay and that the whole thing will be over soon. Sold tells Dagora he's about to show him what's up while his blade starts glowing with intense heat. He lets loose with the flames of the legendary Black Dragon, swinging the sword in a huge arc of fire. Tilty is completely floored by the flaming sword, wondering if she's seeing a brand new killer technique for the first time. The monster loses it and screams about the sword, clearly feeling the pressure from the massive heat coming his way. Dagora dives in yelling for Sold to die, but the kid just lets out a roar and charges straight back at him. The two of them collide in a massive explosion of fire and dark energy, tearing up the air between them. The monster's claw collides with the power of Sold's strike in a sharp burst. A massive wave of energy explodes outward, completely filling the courtyard. Dagora gets blasted back by the force, letting out a wild roar as he loses his footing. Like and Siluria watch in total disbelief while Tilty starts cheering, totally hyped up by Sold, who just stands there looking calm as the smoke clears, even though his blade is shattered. A giant crater sits where the impact happened, showing everyone just how much power the kid just used, but then a creepy laugh comes from the smoke. Sold turns around as Siluria asks what's happening, and Dagora starts pulling himself back up, looking like a total nightmare. Sold is sweating now, and like screams that it's impossible for Dagora to still be alive, but the monster just opens his mouth and calls out his Dark Prominence attack to finish things. Dagora spreads his arms wide as dark energy starts to surge through his entire body, making Sold ask what he's even doing, while Like and Siluria stare in total shock. Unable to believe the light coming from the monster's face is getting so bright it's blinding. And just then the whole area is swallowed by a massive blast of energy as everyone watches from below, with Like yelling that it's a self-destruct move, while Siluria screams Sold's name as the people in the town start freaking out, pointing at the sky and wondering what that light is, as a giant ball of destructive power hangs right over the city, centered over the Hartman estate, causing the citizens to lose their minds since the attack is falling right toward the mansion, while Sold stands there feeling the insane pressure of the magic, realizing he doesn't have a sword to stop it. So Like orders Siluria to evacuate everyone nearby as they scramble for safety. Sold's heart drops as he realizes he isn't going to make it in time, but just as he's about to lose hope, a girl steps out in front of him. It's Tilty, and she tells her big brother to leave it to her while Sold stands there totally stunned, calling out her name since she tells him to just believe in her as she yells and lets out all this crazy dark energy. Sold can't believe she's actually controlling it, wondering if she finally found a strength that won't lose to the dark. She's holding back a massive amount of power above the house, but she grunts, feeling like the force might blow her away as the whole area starts to rumble and shake from the pressure. Tilty puts everything she's got into one final push, yelling for the dark energy to blow every last bit of the enemy away. The wind lock triggers, trapping the area in a huge vortex. The monster is caught totally off guard, making a weird noise as the swirling air starts to rip its attack apart while it looks on in pure shock, screaming about what the hell is even happening to it right now. Siluria looks up with her eyes wide open. She can't believe the massive amount of wind magic suddenly filling the sky. Like calls out to Tilty, and Sold yells to his friends that it's time for them to back her up with everything they've got since Siluria is right there with them, shouting that they're going to protect everyone together as a team. Like loses it, screaming that they're going to save the Hartman family and this whole town from getting wrecked. The monster groans in pain as the wind pressure starts crushing its hand, calling them all a bunch of damn brats, but Tilty just sets her jaw and tells herself she won't lose, focused on making sure everyone finally gets to be happy. The monster starts falling apart as the wind magic rips through its body, and it can only let out a few last sounds before the giant vortex completely swallows the area. The pressure is way too much, and the monster's massive hand gets torn right off. The three of them stand together, channeling the last of the magic. As the dust settles, Like lets out a huge sigh of relief and says they actually did it, which Siluria happily agrees with as they all stand in front of the house, cheering about their big win. Tilty is so hyped that she runs straight towards Sold, shouting that she did it and calling him her big brother, but Sold just stands there with a blank look on his face, totally stunned. And Tilty realizes what she just blurted out, repeating the words while looking completely embarrassed. Sold moves fast to hide the awkward moment, pulling her into a big hug and telling her she was amazing. Sold is feeling pretty overwhelmed by everything happening right now. Tilty is just giggling happily while hugging him, but he can't stop thinking about the magic she just used. It's a terrifying power that can swallow and erase any darkness it touches, and that's exactly what makes her the strongest villainess from the game world. Standing there with that dark aura, it's clear she's tapping into a power born from pure despair. Sold holds her close, promising himself that he'll never let this kind of power fall into the hands of someone evil. Moving on, Like checks the area and mentions that since the estate was evacuated, nobody actually got hurt. So Sold tells Like he's really glad to hear everyone is safe. He starts thinking about the attack and asks if Dagora was sent there specifically on Walger's orders, but Like doesn't think so. He says Walger might be a fool, But he isn't stupid enough to be this forceful since the guy's real goal is to eventually control the entire town. Like looks pretty stressed while explaining that if the townspeople find out Walger killed them, he'd face total condemnation. So he thinks there is a 90% chance this was just Dagora going on a personal rampage. He remembers Dagora looking like a complete monster, obsessed with killing Sold, and Sold chimes in, saying he's pretty sure that cursed tool Siluria mentioned is what actually triggered the whole rampage. Frey and Siluria watch as like reacts with total shock, repeating the words cursed tool like he can't believe it. Sold goes on to explain that it's a cursed piece of gear that gives whoever wears it some crazy demonic power. He starts thinking back to his game knowledge, noting that it's a rare item usually only found in the magic dimension, which reminds like of an old document he once read. He mentions how it said a person gets that power at the cost of being consumed by evil, and Frey agrees with him, saying she noticed Dagora's bracelet felt super creepy and was just overflowing with magic. The group stands together in the wreckage while like wonders who would even give a thing like that to someone like Dagora. Sold realizes that if it wasn't Walger, then it must be a group known as the Titans, a dark organization working behind the scenes. Sold starts thinking about the Titans and wonders if their main goal this whole time has been to capture Tilty. It's a heavy thought, especially since he realizes that Dagora actually could have killed every single one of them. He admits that's the truth, but he still can't figure out what the Titans are really after in the long run. And just as things get quiet, Siluria pipes up to say she's totally fine, which definitely catches everyone off guard. She gets this super determined look on her face and shouts that she won't lose to guys like the Titans, she's ready to fight too. Sold just watches her, but his mind immediately goes back to Tilty and the danger she's in, so like jumps in to say their power is the real deal and it was honestly amazing to watch. Frey laughs and tells them they did a good job training for 3 whole days, but Sold is completely floored because he thought it had only been 1. He mentions they should have only been in that demon dimension for 24 hours, but like explains that time actually moves differently in there. It clicks for Sold as he remembers his game knowledge. Spending a day in that dimension always makes 3 days pass in the real world. Like looks pretty pumped though, saying that with Sold and Tilty working together, their team is basically invincible now. Sold looks at Tilty and thinks about how her power is basically the strongest thing out there. It's the legendary power of the game's ultimate villainess, known mostly as the power of despair. He starts thinking about the dark destiny of ruin waiting for her, grabbing her shoulders while Siluria wonders why her brother is acting so weird. Sold groans, feeling totally overwhelmed by the thought of her fate, and Tilty notices right away, asking if he's okay because he suddenly looks like he's seen a ghost. Sold tries to play it cool and says he's fine, but Siluria can tell something is definitely wrong as everything starts to go blurry for him. He realizes in that moment that his head just isn't working right anymore. Tilty watches him with wide eyes, looking completely terrified for him, while Like and Siluria both lose it, screaming out in shock as they watch him start to tilt over. Sold's legs give out and he hits the ground hard, leaving the 3 of them scrambling to help him. Siluria stands there completely frozen, watching the whole thing happen right in front of her, while Like starts yelling and Tilty looks like she's about to lose it, both of them scrambling over to the middle of the courtyard. Siluria and Like scream out his name as they reach him, and later that night at the estate, everything finally starts to quiet down, as Baba explains that it's just a clear case of mana depletion. She says Sold probably just passed out from using way too much magic, but she tells them to stay calm, because he's going to be just fine as long as he gets some good rest, which leaves Tilty, Like, and Siluria standing by his bed, watching over him while he sleeps. Like points out how weird it is for Sold to even have mana depletion since he isn't supposed to be able to use magic. So, that crazy sword technique has to be the reason. He says it's honestly a mystery how the guy draws out that much power, leaving Siluria just standing there looking down at him, quietly calling out to her big brother. Sold is out cold with a towel on his head, and it turns out the whole reason he collapsed was the sheer strain of using that demon god style. But the kid wouldn't actually find out the specifics of what happened to him until way later on, and right as he's lying there, the knights burst into the room yelling for the young master and the princess. Sold is so far gone he doesn't even know he's on the floor. Zweig and Audrey rush in, panicking because they heard what happened and want to know if he's actually okay, so Like steps up to calm everyone down, telling them that Sold just needs some solid rest and he'll be back on his feet, which is a huge relief for the guards. Zweig is just glad he's safe, while Audrey says they should all pray for him to get better soon. But then Zweig shifts gears and tells Like they managed to bring back that thing he asked for. And Like just gives her a cool thumbs up and a smile, looking like he's got everything under control, while Tilty stands there with her jaw on the floor, trying to put the pieces together of what they actually found. until she sees Zweig holding up a massive, glowing crystal. She asks if that's the magic stone, and Like tells her she's exactly right. Audrey and Zweig show off the loot, explaining how they successfully secured the magic stone after the Black Dragon went down, and it turns out this thing is a massive payday, valued at no less than $1 billion. So Like decides to use the money to pay for the city's repairs, since the stone officially belongs to him. Tilty is just standing there completely speechless, trying to wrap her head around the sheer scale of it all, until she finally snaps out of it and tells Like she actually has a request to make. The knights are caught totally off guard by her sudden seriousness, especially Zweig, who looks pretty surprised, and even Like can only blink in confusion, wondering what Titi could possibly be asking for now. Tilty just stares ahead with a look of pure determination in her eyes. Moving on, the rest of the town is quiet under the starry night sky. But over at the forge, Frey is still wide awake and hammering away at her anvil. Frey stops her work and lifts her goggles, wondering who could be showing up at the forge this late. She opens the door to find Tilty standing there with a cart, asking the girl what could possibly be wrong. Tilty just smiles and reminds her about a promise they made, while Like stands right behind her looking pretty proud of himself. Frey's jaw drops and she looks completely floored by whatever they're showing her. It turns out they brought that massive magic stone right into her shop, and she can't even believe her eyes. Tilty is glowing with excitement now that she's finally made it to Frey's place with the goods. Frey starts breaking a sweat as she realizes Tilty actually brought all the magic stones they found, which is when Tilty drops into a deep bow, begging Frey to use these stones to forge a special sword for her big brother. She gets really serious, explaining that regular blades just break because they can't keep up with his insane skill, and even though his gear fails him, he still fights with everything he's got just to keep everyone safe. Tilty keeps pouring her heart out while she's bowed down, saying he'll keep going until he collapses. But she knows if he actually had a magic stone sword, he'd finally be able to fight without holding anything back. She acknowledges that asking for this is asking for something crazy expensive, but she keeps begging Frey, while the rest of the crew just stands there watching her give it everything she's got to help her brother. Siluria looks pretty down as she mentions Tilty's mansion is still half-wrecked and they need a ton of money to fix it, but Like gets this look in his eye and says that in the end, it's all just a matter of money. Ainz and Audrey speak up too, reminding everyone that Sold's sword has saved a ton of lives, theirs included, and Siluria adds that there's no doubt he's going to save way more people in the future. Tilty starts tearing up because she realizes that kind of value is something money could never replace. So Like turns to the blacksmith with a big smile and tells her to go ahead and use every single magic stone they brought. Sold really deserves this because he's shown everyone he's worth the effort. And between Tilty's heartfelt wish and Rake's smart planning, things are finally moving. Rake manages to get the massive magic stone into Frey's hands, and as the blacksmith looks it over, she says the magic inside is insane, and this job is going to be a real challenge. Tilty looks her in the eye and begs her to use that power to make the sword, so Frey looks back at her, thinking about how Tilty looked so pathetic when they first met compared to the tough expression she's wearing now, all because she's fighting for her big brother. She pats Tilty's head and tells her to leave it to her, promising to forge the greatest sword anyone has ever seen, but she adds that Tilty needs to tell Saldo to quit sleeping his life away. Tilty just gives her a big smile and tells her thanks for everything. Thinking back, it really looks like Tilty has gotten way stronger while no one was paying attention, and by the next morning, the whole town gathers in the square to hear what happened. Like stands on stage with Siluria and tells everyone that the villain Dagora attacked them yesterday, but they can finally rest easy now. He shouts at the top of his lungs that he's killed Dagora, making sure every single person in the crowd hears the news. The people absolutely lose it. They start cheering and praying, relieved that the villain is finally gone for good. They keep chanting for Like and Siluria, celebrating the victory like it's the best thing that ever happened to the town. Everyone is yelling that Like is a hero and wishing long life to the Hartman family, while Siluria just stands there taking it all in. But Like turns his back to the crowd and tells them he didn't do this alone, because the person who really saved them was the one who stood up when Dagora attacked and things looked completely hopeless. He explains that before the attack, a crazy demonic dimension opened up, and they even had to deal with a legendary dragon. Like keeps the story going, telling the crowd about the brutal life-or-death struggle against the Black Dragon. He even gets honest with them and admits his own legs were completely frozen from fear when it happened. But then he tells everyone he had a friend right there who helped him find the courage to finally take a step forward. And he describes this kid who was smaller than him and couldn't even use a single spell, but still believed in his own path, explaining how the boy picked up a sword and worked until he was strong, never letting any hardship stop him because he's the true hero who actually saved the town. Like points him out to the entire crowd and shouts his name at the top of his lungs, introducing the son of the Ranger family, Sold Ranger. He raises his fist and tells everyone to give it up for the guy who risked his life and is currently resting, and the whole place goes nuts, chanting for Lord Sold and calling him the hero of the town. They keep cheering for the Ranger family, while Sold realizes that Like's speech just turned him into a legend. Back home in the mountains, Galland is just out there working the fields like any other day, totally clueless that his reputation is blowing up while his wife Muro calls out for him to take a break. Back at the ceremony, Like keeps the momentum going and tells the crowd that Sold isn't the only hero they should be celebrating. He makes sure everyone knows that Sold's sister was right there fighting alongside him. He presents Tilty to the entire town and yells for everyone to give it up for her. And just like that, the spotlight is on Tilty as the crowd starts to lose it. Everyone starts cheering at the top of their lungs, shouting "Long live Lady Tilty" and the Ranger siblings, making it clear they've become the town's biggest stars. Tilty just gives a little smile, realizing this was all part of Like's plan to get the town on her side, so it's way harder for any enemies to try and mess with her. While the Hartman family's name is higher than ever, the reputation of all those corrupt nobles is absolutely tanking, and the crowd's energy only makes the situation worse for the bad guys. Walger Debyhip is back at his place losing his mind, clutching his head and cursing the Hartmans and the Rangers to hell for ruining everything. He's shaking with rage, insisting to himself that his family are the only ones actually fit to rule the town, but the reality of the situation is clearly starting to sink in. He can't believe the townspeople are ignoring him to praise a bunch of brats instead, and the more he thinks about it, the more he just can't understand why things turned out this way. His face is practically turning purple as he seethes, blaming the whole mess on Dagora for going rogue and acting on his own. Walger is having a total meltdown, gripping his hair and sweating like crazy while he wonders why he's the one getting blamed when he thinks he did nothing wrong. A voice suddenly cuts through his whining, telling him straight up that this whole mess is actually his fault, as a mysterious figure in a fur-lined cloak walks into the room. The visitor reminds Walger that he was already warned this was his very last chance, and the noble can only let out a terrified squeak as he looks up. Tilty's brother stands there looking real imposing, while he points out that Walger still managed to fail at capturing the Dark Priestess, leaving the noble to beg for mercy from his master. He looks down at Walger with these cold, sharp eyes and tells him he's just completely useless, which is why he had to show up and handle things personally since Walger couldn't get the job done on his own. Walger stays on his knees, desperately trying to shift the blame by yelling that it's not his fault and that the Hartman family are the ones who ruined everything. Tilty's brother just gives a dark little laugh and says, "Very well," seemingly moving on to his next move as he turns away from the cowering noble. Over at the Hartman estate, Tilty is caught off guard by something while her brother mentions how the Dark Priestess will be watching over things for a while. Standing out on the balcony, the masked man explains that the darkness is only growing, and it's all feeding off the emotions of everyone involved. The narrator points out that Siluria's power actually got a lot stronger during that whole mess with Dagora, and it's only going to keep getting more intense as she moves forward. Back at the mansion, Walger is totally confused and asks how the master made Dagora go crazy, but Tilty's brother just tells him to stay calm because he has a specific question. He asks Walger if he still wants to be the one running this town. Walger doesn't even hesitate and says yes, so the masked man offers to give him the power to dominate everything. He mentions the power of darkness, which just makes Walger even more confused, but Tilty's brother explains that he's going to use Walger's own greed to make it happen. He reaches out toward the noble, and as he keeps talking about this dark power, Walger starts to freak out and screams for his master. This creepy mass of dark energy and eyes starts to take over while the voice tells him he needs to make this power grow, leading to a horrific scream that echoes all the way through the mansion walls. Watching from the window, Tilty's brother notes that the young swordsman Sold is actually the key to Tilty's development. Tilty's brother stares out, thinking about that sword ranger and how the power from his magic sword, it looks way too much like the darkness. He says they'll find out the truth soon enough, laughing to himself about what's going to happen in the next experiment. Back at the house, Sold is still passed out in bed. He narrates that when he finally woke up, he didn't realize a new mess was already starting. He just lays there with his eyes shut, thinking back about how he had absolutely no way of knowing what was coming next. Over at the blacksmith shop, the lights are still on late at night while the sound of a hammer hitting metal rings out. Inside, Frey is working hard and complains about how stubborn this magic stone is being, but she isn't quitting. She raises her hammer high, telling the stone to bring it on because she's going to forge it no matter what. And with a crazy look of determination, she vows to turn it into the greatest sword that's ever been made. While Sold sleeps peacefully, Frey's voice echoes the promise for him to just wait and see what she's cooking up. It's been 3 days since they took down Dagora, and Tilty and Siluria are standing there looking pretty serious about things. Inside the room, Siluria looks over at the bed and mentions that her big brother isn't waking up at all, while she tries to stay positive, telling Tilty that Sold will definitely get better soon, and Tilty can only agree. Sold narrates that he was still fast asleep during all this, and he had no clue that a brand new threat was already closing in on them. Just then, Zweig bursts into the room yelling that the young master is calling for both of them right now. Siluria asks what happened with her brother, but Zweig just shouts that they've shown up again. And outside, the town is a total mess with people running for their lives as fires break out everywhere. The townspeople scream about the fiends showing up, and there are way too many of them to handle. But old stories say that humans who get corrupted by cursed tools turn into these things called magin. Like tells the girls, there's a report of a magin that looks just like Dagora currently tearing up the town. Inside the office, a knight reports that someone is using cursed tools again, and like snaps into action, shouting that the Hartman family's strongest forces are going to stop the damage from spreading further. He looks at his team and asks Audrey, Zweig, and Silria if he can count on them, and they all quickly agree to the plan. Everything is moving fast and like turns toward Tilty, telling her he needs to borrow her strength for this fight too. Tilty looks totally stoked to help out and tells Reich she's definitely in, while Like gives the final orders, saying he and Ainz will manage the chaos from the mansion as the team head out. Smoke and fire start taking over the town as the attack gets worse and the locals start losing it, but the knights try their best to get everyone to evacuate the area safely. Right in the middle of the street, 3 Magin show up and start wrecking everything in sight. The Magin creatures roam the streets with one goal in mind, laughing as they repeat their plan to destroy everything, and the lead monster gets right in the camera, looking completely obsessed with wrecking the entire city. The Hartman Knights don't waste time, immediately blasting the beast with an aqua lance and a rock axe combo that sends the creature flying backward, leaving it flat on its back in the middle of the stone street while the knights regroup. One mentions how creepy the demon looks, but his partner just shrugs it off, saying these guys are total weaklings compared to the black dragon they faced before. They think the fight is already finished, but then the monster's clawed hand starts twitching on the ground. One of the knights barely has time to react before the creature shoots a massive blast of energy right at them. The attack hits the buildings behind them with a huge explosion, sending wood and glass flying everywhere as the knights scramble for cover. They can't believe what they're seeing, and one of them says this has to be some kind of joke because the monster is standing right back up, and it's still coming for them even though its entire head was blown off. The monster refuses to stay down, and Siluria realizes this thing is just as stubborn as that demon Dagora was, so she steps up and unleashes her magic, calling out an airlock. Windlock spell that traps the creature in a massive swirling vortex. Siluria yells for Tilty to take the opening, and Tilty is more than ready to jump in and help, as she pushes her hands forward and commands the darkness to crush their enemies, sending out massive dark claws that wrap around the wind trap and completely engulf the monsters in a mix of shadow and wind magic while the knights watch. The Hartman Knights are losing it over how strong Tilty is, but while Tilty just giggles, Siluria is already analyzing the fight and thinking these demons are actually weaker than Dagora. The monsters are still growling and trying to fight back, and Siluria points out that there are still 2 of them left to finish off. Tilty is hyped up and says she's going to do her absolute best, running forward alongside Siluria to end the fight, but they're suddenly cut off by a deep voice asking what they think they're doing, and everyone stops dead when a massive armored boot hits the ground. It's Mobrib and the rest of the Debbie Hip Knights, showing up in force and looking like they're about to cause some real problems. Siluria recognizes the guy right away. It's Mobrib, and the Hartman Knights realize he's a royal guard for the Devihip family who tells them they finally showed up, and that they should all work together to save the town. But just as he's talking, the group asks what he's doing because his face starts twisting and growing extra eyeballs all over his skin, while Tilty and Siluria can only watch in total shock, hoping what they're seeing isn't real as the knights start to panic, because one of Mobrib's massive eyes bulges out while he rasps out a final cheer for Lord Walger. And then there's a huge flash of light that leaves everyone wondering if this is the power of a cursed tool right before the group scrambles back as a massive, clawed arm swipes through the air where the humans used to be. The thing that was Mobrib starts growling about how Lord Walger will dominate everything, while the other knights call Hartman the enemy, and the transformation is finished. They're all just mindless beasts with way too many mouths and eyes now. Tilty and the others realize the worst has happened. Every single one of those guards has turned into a demon. Siluria can barely get her words out as she watches the horror unfold, calling out for her brother while everything falls apart for Tilty's group, but at the same time, the story shifts back to what's happening with Sold's house. Things look peaceful enough on the outside of the manor for the moment, but inside his room, Sold is fast asleep in his bed, though it turns out he's caught in a really weird dream, and his eyes suddenly snap wide open like he's seeing something he can't believe. which takes us inside the vision where two massive spirit beasts are standing right over him. And then the creatures start talking, telling him that the power they share is actually the power of demon. They give him a heavy warning, saying the more he uses that strength, the more he surrenders his body to the dark, and eventually he'll just become a monster who has to cast aside his humanity for good. The beasts loom over him one last time, asking Soldal Ranger what his next move is going to be. The spirit beasts keep pressuring Sold, saying it doesn't matter if he turns into a demon or loses his humanity, but Sold doesn't look bothered at all, just replying that his fate has actually been sealed for a long time now. Standing tall between the two massive creatures, he yells out that his only goal is to protect his villainous sister, and he reaches his hand out toward the spirits, telling them to just shut up and follow his lead. The beasts seem to accept his resolve, declaring that this is the true power of the demon god style. Meanwhile, back in the real world, Frey shows up at the Ranger family manor carrying some gear, and she just storms right through the front door, shouting for someone to tell her where Sold is hiding. Baba and the house guards are completely caught off guard, frantically trying to stop her and asking what she needs, so Frey casually mentions she's a friend and demands to be shown to his room, even though Baba warns her he still needs to rest. She doesn't listen though, kicking the bedroom door wide open and yelling about how he's still sleeping. Sold is finally up and moving, standing by the window to stretch out his arm and test his strength, when Frey suddenly pops in with a big grin, winking and saying she sees he's finally awake while Baba just stands there looking completely stunned. Sold gives her a warm smile, telling her that he literally just opened his eyes, so she steps forward and holds out a long package wrapped in cloth, mentioning that she finished making the item she promised him. Frey looks pretty proud of herself as she tells him she crafted this specifically just for him. Sold looks totally hyped, repeating the words that this is a sword meant only for him, and it's revealed to be a stunning weapon Frey calls the Sword of Sold, also known as the Luminous Blade or the Magic Light Sword. Sold holds it up in total shock, asking if she's for real about the name before commenting on how light and beautiful it feels. Frey crosses her arms confidently, saying the Luminous Blade will definitely respond to his magic sword style, but Sold realizes that in the game this thing is actually the legendary final weapon you only get at the very end, making it easily the strongest sword in existence. Frey tells Sold to be careful with the new weapon, which catches him off guard for a second as she explains that even as the person who built the sword, she honestly doesn't know the limit of its power. Frey looks a bit worried, mentioning she hopes the blade doesn't react too much to his magic and end up becoming a danger to him. Sold just stands there holding the sword and tells her not to worry because he knows he can handle it. He starts thinking about the future, picturing the massive monsters and dragons he'll have to face, knowing that with this new magic light sword, he's just going to slash right through anything that tries to stop him. Seeing his confidence, Frey can't help but give him a small, proud look, but then she tells him to get moving, just as a shout comes from outside that a monster has appeared in town and everything is falling apart. The peace is gone instantly, with smoke and fire already rising from the buildings nearby, while a bunch of monsters start swarming the streets, causing everyone to freak out and run for cover. Zweig yells that they're in real trouble because the odds are totally against them, but the knight next to him tells him to stay focused and hold the line. Siluria steps up and shouts that it's okay because she's going to protect Tilty, no matter what. Tilty can only watch and call out her name as one of the masked bandits charges in, screaming at them to die for the sake of Lord Walga, when suddenly a massive head made of energy drops right out of the sky, completely shocking everyone on the battlefield. Siluria looks up at the scale of the attack with wide eyes, realizing she knows exactly what that thing is, while the black dragon flame slash hits the ground with insane force, absolutely wrecking the area. The blast leaves a massive smoking crater in the middle of the street and sends the bandits flying in every direction, and Siluria can't help but let out an excited shout when she sees who's standing there. Tilty calls out Sold's name while Siluria cheers for her big brother, who finally shows up looking ready for a fight, and Sold just stands there with those dark markings on his face, giving off a confident smirk like he's already won. The bandits lose it and start screaming at the kid for interfering with their plans, but Sold doesn't even flinch. He just holds his blade high and tells the spirit inside the sword to answer him, and he lets out a massive ice wolf flash that sends frozen energy tearing across the whole area. Sold moves like a blur, cutting right through the middle of the enemy group and wrecking everyone in his path. The Hartman Knights start cheering their heads off while Siluria runs forward with a huge smile on her face. As the ice crystals settle, she jumps right into Sold's arms for a big hug while he stands there with his sword. Siluria starts crying because she's so happy he's okay, and Sold just gives her a gentle smile and says he's sorry for worrying everyone, especially Tilty. The rest of the group crowds around him, with Zweig and Ainz shouting how glad they are that he's finally awake and back in the fight. Sold looks at his friends and tells them he's just relieved that Siluria and the rest of them are safe. Zweig mentions how crazy those finishing moves were, but Audrey is more shocked that the sword didn't even break after all that power. Frey looks at the aftermath with a calm smile and says that things are finally finished at last, and nods along, saying he sees how everything went down while Siluria watches them both with a huge grin. The sword itself is incredible. It has the power to handle the Ice Wolf's freezing frost and the Black Dragon's flames without breaking, which is why Sold holds the blade high for everyone to see, explaining that this weapon was made specifically for using the Majin style, and he stands there proudly, telling the knights that this is the only sword of its kind in the entire world. Siluria is practically jumping for joy as she tells Frey that she really did make the best sword, just like she promised she would. Frey points out that it's not just the weapon. She tells Sold his own techniques have gotten way stronger too, and Sold agrees that the sword is super dependable. But things take a turn when gets a worried look on his face, wondering why Imagine would even be showing up here in the first place. Nearby, the town is getting wrecked as fires break out and the knights start running to deal with the chaos, so Ainz watches the smoke rising over the buildings and decides he needs to get back to the young master's side right away. Audrey notices that Walger's soldiers are turning into Magins and wonders if their leader is behind it, which makes Sold realize the Debbie Hip family might be pulling the strings, but then Siluria screams as she catches a glimpse of the future. Calls out to her as she breaks down in tears. Her clairvoyance is showing her something that's clearly terrifying her, and she tells them that the entire town is in trouble and is in serious danger, leaving Sold to ask what exactly she's seeing. In her vision, a massive shadow with glowing eyes shows up over the buildings. It looks like the whole place is about to be swallowed. Sold raises his sword with a determined look, ready to use his power to cut through whatever is coming for them. Meanwhile, over at the main noble mansion in the city, clouds are starting to roll in over the rooftops. Someone is moving through the halls with a sense of urgency, their boots clicking against the floor as they rush toward the office. The large double doors are kicked open with a loud bang, and storms into the room yelling Walger's name, but the noble just sits there quietly at his desk with a glass of wine. Walger looks at with total disgust, calling him a brat and yelling at him for barging into the office without an invite. The guy is clearly pissed. Doesn't back down though, shouting that he knows he's being rude, but he's officially had enough of whatever Walger is pulling. He points right at the noble and demands an explanation. He's got reports that Walger's own people are the ones causing all the trouble in town, and Walger just stares at him with this annoyed look, muttering about how much of a nuisance has turned out to be. Then he asks why he hasn't left town yet, which completely catches off guard, making him ask what that's supposed to mean. Suddenly Walger just loses it, screaming at the top of his lungs that everything is fault for trying to play the hero and acting like some perfect ruler. He shouts that the Debbie Hip family are the ones who really run this town, while and Ainz look on, calling him out for being absolute scum. Wonders why he'd even admit to it now, but he tells Walger that since he knows the truth, it's all over for the corrupt noble. The room goes quiet for a second before Walger lets out a gross, pig-like laugh, mocking for thinking that anything is actually finished. He tells them that things are actually just getting started, and looking at the sweat on and Ainz faces, they're starting to realize something huge is about to happen. Walger stands behind his desk, looking completely freaked out as he realizes he's losing control of whatever power he was using, and then this gross, multi-eyed fleshy mass starts bursting out of his hand, growing way faster than he can handle, making and Ainz freeze up in shock, just staring as they realize the noble is turning into a total monster right in front of them. Meanwhile, Sold and the rest of the crew are hauling it through the town streets, trying to get to the mansion as fast as they can while Sold asks Siluria if she's 100% sure about the location from her vision, and she tells him she's positive, so they keep pushing, but Tilty adds that she can feel a massive shadow at Walger's place, something big enough to level the entire town if they don't hurry. She says she won't ever forgive something this messed up, and tells the guys they've got to put a stop to this before it's too late. Suddenly Sold skids to a stop and tells everyone to wait, pointing out something ahead. He's got a really bad feeling about the way Walger's mansion is starting to rattle, with the whole building shaking like there's an earthquake hitting only that spot. Then the roof just explodes as this massive, dark creature with glowing eyes bursts through the stone, looking like it's ready to wreck everything. Sold and the crew are completely caught off guard, staring at the mansion as he yells out in shock, and then comes sprinting through the gates, screaming for everyone to get back while Sold realizes both he and Ainz are barely making it out, but doesn't stop, shouting that the monster they're looking at is actually Walger, and that the guy used some kind of cursed tool to change. Sold is just frozen there, trying to wrap his head around how a human could turn into something like that so fast. The whole group looks like tiny specks as they stand in front of the wreckage, completely dwarfed by the massive creature which starts growling about how this town belongs to him and how he's not letting anyone take it. The thing is absolutely massive now, a total demon with a skull face and a giant eye right in the middle of its chest. It lets out a deafening roar, claiming that Tilty belongs to him as it stands over the crumbling ruins of the mansion. Looking up at the mess, Sold gets this look of total disgust and calls the thing a loathsome demon. But the monster doesn't care, looking down at Like and the others like they're just trash he's about to wipe off the map. Sold jumps into action, firing off a wind blast and yelling that he isn't going to let this happen, and then Like backs him up, screaming that the monster is a fool if it thinks it rules here since protecting the town is their actual job. Sold calls out Like's name while Zweig and Siluria watch from the side, terrified and screaming for their big brother as Ainz barks out orders for the knights to follow the young master, and they all yell back and get ready to charge. The whole group looks like tiny ants compared to the massive demon looming over the rubble, making the monster look even creepier as it stares them down with those empty, dead eyes. Everyone pulls together for a massive combined attack, throwing magic and steel at the beast with everything they've got. But Walger just stands there, calling them as annoying as a tiny thorn, while the crew realizes their best shot didn't even leave a scratch. The monster just tells them to get lost as a weird light starts building up deep in its throat, and suddenly it lets loose a massive energy beam that completely wrecks everything in its path. The monster stands tall over the ruins, letting out a gross, loud laugh while the knights scramble through the dust, yelling to check if the young master and the princess made it out okay. Like tells them they're safe for now because everyone pooled their magic for a shield, but Sold can't believe how much power they're up against. Sold pulls Tilty close, telling Walger he's a monster for throwing away his humanity just to chase his own twisted desires, but Walger doesn't care and says he's going to wipe out every single piece of trash in this town. He lets off another massive blast that cuts through the city like paper, and Sold and the others can only watch in total shock as the beam levels everything. The whole area lights up with a giant explosion, leaving the monster standing there as a dark silhouette against the fire. Buildings start coming down and people are running everywhere just trying to stay alive, and the local families are completely losing it, crying and screaming as their home gets wrecked. Like and Tilty stand together, looking out at the ruined town and all the people suffering. It's a total mess, and Like finally loses his cool, screaming Walger's name at the top of his lungs. The giant monster just stands there laughing while people everywhere are running for their lives and screaming for help, but something huge catches it by surprise. A massive dragon made of flames bites right into its neck, making Sold show up out of nowhere, lunging through the air and yelling Walger's name as he puts everything into his strike. He connects with his black dragon flame slash, and the fire just completely wraps around the monster's head. Then the force of the hit sends the monster's head snapping back while Sold lands perfectly on a roof nearby. Like calls out to Sold in shock, and Siluria yells for her big brother as they all watch the fight go down. Sold holds his pose and asks how they like that, but he's already looking back to see if he actually did enough damage. Turns out the monster isn't done yet, as thick black blood starts leaking from its neck while it just stands there. The monster lets out a massive, terrifying roar that shakes the whole area. It's completely out of control and Sold watches from the rooftop, as the beast's neck heals itself right in front of his eyes. He says he finally sees what's going on and has the monster figured out, which means he's realized this is the Dark Giant, a creature that can regenerate no matter what kind of damage it takes. Sold's heart sinks as he remembers this thing is actually the final boss the villainess controls at the very end of the game, but he can't believe it's showing up here of all places. He wonders if saving Tilty is what changed things, and realizes the fate of this world is shifting way faster than he expected, leaving him in a tough spot. In the game, the hero used holy power to win, but Sold knows he doesn't have anything like that right now. He thinks about using Tilty's dark power to wipe the monster out, just like he did when he fought Dagora, but he stops himself immediately. He knows that power is way too dangerous to mess with because if that darkness grows any stronger than it already is, it might be the end for her. And Sold is terrified that it'll just push Tilty even faster toward her destiny of becoming the villainess he's trying to save her from. Sold stands on the roof trying to keep it together. He tells himself he has to fight this fate no matter what. He starts looking around, saying his sword has to be around here somewhere, but the view from the cliff shows the city is already a total disaster zone. The Dark Giant is just walking through walls and crushing houses, all while the mysterious leader stands on the edge watching it happen. The masked man looks out at the mess and calls it splendid, specifically talking to Mr. Walger. He mentions how Walger's crazy need to dominate everything has finally pulled in a massive demonic force, and with a creepy look on his face, he says the real experiment is only just beginning. He looks down at the people cowering in the streets and calls out to Tilty, calling her the Priestess of Darkness. He wonders out loud how she's going to try and resist the power, while Tilty just stands there in the middle of the wreckage, completely terrified and crying as she watches the world fall apart. Nearby, Siluria is losing it too. She's sobbing while hanging onto Like, who looks like he's hitting his breaking point seeing his city get wrecked. Even the knights are screaming as they try to fight back, but they're clearly outmatched by the sheer scale of the attack, which gets even worse when the monster lets out a blast that levels the surrounding buildings. Parents are grabbing their kids and running for their lives while people are getting knocked down everywhere. Tilty begs for the nightmare to stop, her eyes wide and full of tears, but the only response she gets is a dark chuckle echoing through the chaos. Tilty stands there shaking as dark energy starts rising up around her. She says she just can't do this anymore and says she won't forgive them for what's happening. Tilty loses it, letting out a scream while a dark mark shows up right on her forehead. A giant monster made of wood and shadows grows out of the ground with Tilty standing right on its head. She yells out again that she won't forgive them, and back on the ground like is totally speechless. Siluria is right next to him, terrified, asking what that massive thing even is. The half-bodied giant stands tall over the ruins of the city, looking like something straight out of a nightmare. Sold watches from a rooftop as the wooden giant faces off against the bone monster. He realizes what he's seeing and he can't believe how much dark power is coming off Tilty right now. It's way more intense than he expected, but the bone giant isn't backing down, standing its ground in the middle of all the wreckage. Tilty points forward from her spot on the giant's head and calls on the darkness. Then with tears still streaming down her face, she screams for the monster to go for it and attack. The dark giant throws a massive punch that connects right with the bone giant's face, and the bone giant lets out a loud, painful cry as the force of the hit starts breaking it apart. Tilty stands on top of her summon's head, looking down at the wreckage while the giant towers over everything. She's crying and losing it, screaming at the top of her lungs for the enemies to just disappear. Down on the ground, Like is completely floored by the sight, calling it the dark giant and saying its power is just on another level. He points out that every time the dark giant even touches the enemy, Walger's monster gets chipped away. Like wonders if the darkness's power to erase things has gotten even stronger while the bone giant keeps screaming in pain. Siluria looks up and says Tilty is actually amazing for doing this, but she's also looking pretty worried about something. She thinks back to how she could only move the arms of darkness before, and now she realizes the situation is way different because the giant's entire body is finally manifesting right in the middle of the city. Tilty stands on top of the giant's head with her arms wide open, shouting that this is exactly what she wanted. She looks completely gone, talking about how beautiful this dark power is as it finally comes down. She cheers the giant on, telling it to keep going and make all that despair feel even louder while she gives the order to just let the darkness swallow everything in sight. Tears are streaming down her face as she screams about the enemy trampling on human lives, yelling that she'll never forgive them. The dark giant raises its massive, swirling hand high into the air. Tilty looks tiny standing on its shoulder as the bone monster lets out a pathetic shriek, completely unable to stop what's coming next. The dark giant throws a heavy punch that connects right with the bone monster's head, smashing through it and shattering the creature's jaw into pieces from the sheer force of the hit. Like and Siluria are stuck watching from the ground, totally shocked by the insane power Tilty is showing off. Like watches the chaos and asks why all this is happening while Sold stands firm in the smoke. Tilty loses it, crying as she asks why he's getting in her way and screaming for her brother. Sold just says Tilty's name as he stands there in the middle of the crater with his sword out, and he tells her she needs the strength to never lose her reason for living, promising he won't let her fall into darkness.